special budget meeting for the Ferguson Township Board of Supervisors. And first up, we'll go to our Township Manager, Centrise Martin, and she will let everyone know how they can participate in our hybrid format meeting. Thank you, Centrise.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the members of the public, to members of the board, of course, staff and members of the public for joining us this afternoon on this November 9th special meeting of the Board of Supervisors. This meeting has been properly advertised in accordance with the Pennsylvania Sunshine Act as a hybrid meeting with the option to attend online using the Zoom platform. And the main meeting room here is available for members of the public to attend in person. If you are joining the Zoom meeting this afternoon and wish to speak on behalf of an agenda item, please say your name, municipality of residence, and the topic you wish to speak on when the chairwoman calls on you. Prior to commencing this meeting, I have a few short procedural items to cover. First, members of the public using the Zoom platform are asked to remain muted during the meeting to prevent any ambient noise from disrupting the meeting. If a member of the public is acknowledged by the chair, they may unmute their microphone for their question or comment. Secondly, board members are asked to indicate their name when motioning or seconding a motion so that the minutes may accurately reflect the action taken. And finally, a roll call of the Board of Supervisors will now be taken to ensure that all members can hear and interact using the Zoom meeting platform. Please indicate that you are here when your name is called. Ms. Deneni?
Here.
Ms. Stevens?
Here.
Mr. Thompson?
Here.
Ms. Strickland?
Here.
Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you so much. First up on our agenda is citizens input. That would be for items that are not on our agenda today. Do we have any citizens input? Seeing none, I will then transition with a thank you to staff. It has been a very, very busy, unexpectedly busy budget season, and just really a heartfelt thanks and an acknowledgement of all it took to get us to this point. And we are just really very thankful. I'm not sure what else to say. With that, I'm going to move to presentation of the draft 2023 annual operating budget. This will be from Manager Martin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also would like to say a few words, if you don't mind, prior to going into a presentation with an overview of the proposed 2023 operating budget. I would like to begin with expressing gratitude for the team that I have here at Ferguson Township. The budget has been prepared with tremendous support and participation among and from this leadership team that we have here at Ferguson Township. To Dave Modriker, I appreciate your thoroughness and your inclusive efforts in all the time that you take to slow things down in meetings and communications to ensure that I have an understanding of some of the activity that is going on and the history that comes with it. I thank him. I thank him for his commitment to servant leadership because I think it is that level of commitment to service that affords him the patience with me in this transition, and now his third manager in his tenure here at Ferguson Township. I also want to applaud Angela Kauke, the Human Resource Administrator, for hiring, first and foremost, between 12 full-time employees and to possibly as many as 5 part-time and seasonal employees just in this 1 year. When I took this time, during my time as interim manager, we had between 5 to 7 vacancies that we needed to fill. And then we also had some turnover last year and this year. I applaud her for her commitment and her effort to keep us moving forward to ensure that the departments had the resources they need and the talent to keep moving all the services and the service level that our residents expect to have. I'm grateful for Angela's hard work, her institutional knowledge, and her ability to motivate employees to get the job done. And to Eric Anderson, our Finance and Tax Director, many thanks to him for the countless hours that he has given to ensure that I knew and understood the details of the budget and operations within his department for a productive and collaborative working relationship moving forward. I really appreciate, especially these last few weeks, you all should know that I have taken Eric's time tirelessly so we could exchange levels of information to better understand what the path forward looked like, not just for finance and tax, but for the operating budget, and ensure that we could be a good team. I'm also deeply appreciative of Jenna Wargo, our Director of Planning and Zoning, for her steady and skilled commitment to servant leadership. She focuses on facilitating consistent practices, and she encourages diversity of thought. And I'm really grateful for that. Many thanks to James Progar for jumping into the Assistant Township Manager role and showing up in any capacity that he is needed to serve the township. He's been with us in this role in just a short period of time, but his ability to use his technical skill and insight, as well as rise up to serve in a servant leadership, is quite impressive and also appreciated. He too brings a servant leadership with an unselfish mindset and strives to bring people together to create a culture of trust and reliability. I also have a heartfelt thanks for Chief Albright, who is not here with us, but I think it should be known that his 30 years of dedication to Ferguson Township in law enforcement really, of course, served Ferguson Township very well, but was really instrumental to some of the transition that I had, particularly as my time as interim manager. There were times where I may have even experienced a second, just a second, but admittedly that second mattered, of doubt. And it was Chief Albright that reminded me and just demonstrated his level of leadership by just bringing that humanistic level of leadership into our conversations, and that was very meaningful. I also want to acknowledge that we have here with us Sergeant Hendrick, officer in charge, and I really appreciate that he stepped into this role to keep things moving forward, and his leadership to rise to the occasion and serve in the way that the township has really needed him. And last but not least, of course, I have to give a shout out to Miss Faith Norris. You know, Faith has been with the township, I think, for maybe 7 to 8 years in just a short period of time. But I will say that while she may not be officially on the leadership team, her service to the township has been unwavering. And it should be noted that without Faith being part of my team, I would not have succeeded to this point in time in the way that I have. So I wanted just to take a minute, and I appreciate the board for giving me that time. I wanted to call everyone out that I work with daily, one-on-one, to just be able to be where I'm at right here as your manager, because without them, I'm not here doing what I've been able to accomplish thus far. Of course, there are other members of the staff. I could call them out, but it would take a little longer, but I do intend to do that at some point in the future. But many thanks to all the staff who've really accepted this transition and their unwavering support to the township.
Thank you so much. And before you get at all into the meat of the budget, I did want to clarify too. I normally talk just briefly about process. So this is also kind of, I think, honoring the work of the team, because we don't pick apart each section of the budget, and hopefully we don't pick it apart, but we review it in its totality to be able to advise at the end on our thoughts, kind of after seeing what's been presented. So what we'll do is, we'll move through each section as indicated in the agenda, but we'll just be really flagging things and maybe giving a reason why we're flagging it, perhaps, as opposed to making decisions as we're in the meat of the budget. So that right back to you. Thank you.
Thank you. And I also do want to recognize here with me Lindsay Biddle. While she has only been here with the township for a month, I don't have as many words just yet. I know, give me a year, I'll have just as many. She's our communications coordinator, and she is joining us here to ensure that the communications are accurately recorded, while Rhonda is also taking minutes for this meeting. She will assist in making sure that the items that are flagged as part of the conversations are documented. So thank you, Lindsay, and welcome to the team. Okay, so something a little different, of course. We all bring our own style into these positions, and so I wanted to do a general overview, and I wanted to bring to the board some attention and focus to areas that I think are necessary I think we're at that point in time where it comes to say that we've brought in this budget some requests, not just for staffing, but to convert some of our paper-based workflow into more of a online system process that we believe will increase the levels of efficiency and reduce some of the strain. And I want to be able to talk a little bit about that by just highlighting certain areas that I'd like to call out for attention, not necessarily for discussion, but just as the introduction to the review of the budget. I intend to be pretty short, but just to kind of go through this, and then as part of the review of the budget sections, we can certainly go back and talk about any one item that I'm presenting in this presentation. So provided with the budget in my message, you may have read that I did identify some of the micro and macro impacts to the township, some of which I think are recognized in the message as being more of a common local government challenge, and others of which that are just more macro external forces that are out of our control. But we have to keep that in the foresight as we look to advance our budget discussions. First and foremost, I want to bring to the board's attention, and you may have seen a few emails from our finance and tax director acknowledging some changes that we need to make, changes for the good. So let's start with that. Items that were missed, a $700,000 grant that the township received needs to be added into the account, well, I'll say Fund 32, account 354.030. So this is to offset the $700,000 for construction of the Pine Grove Mills Bike and Pedestrian Safety Project. So currently now we have $700,000 for the construction of this project, but we don't have the TASA grant to offset that expenditure. That will be added into the budget. Item number 2, we need to utilize the Northland Mobility Committed Fund. Currently in the budget, we have a Northland Mobility Committed Fund, and we've been able to accrue, I believe, a little over $800,000. Part of the budget as it's been presented does not include the deduction of $400,000 for the Blue Course Drive expenditure that is recognized in the budget in Fund 32. And of course, when Public Works, Dave Modricker presents his budget, he will emphasize this point and better illustrate what this amendment that will be made looks like. I also want to bring to the attention, an amendment is actually to my manager message. I have in there that there's 5 full-time staffing requests. It's actually 7 full-time staffing requests and 2 part-time requests, which of course we'll get in and talk a little bit more about those requests as we move into the budget discussion. I also want to recognize that we need to do an increase to account 410-750 for the public safety budget. Sergeant Hendrick will talk a little bit more about that. We need to increase the $80,000 for the 2 Ford hybrids to $90,000. So we need to do an increase of $10,000 to the account 410.750, capital equipment - police. And then we also need to increase a $15,000 allotment to the electronic accessories and markings for the 2 SUVs, which is a total of $25,000. So those are the 4 amendments that I wanted to bring to your attention that needed to be made in the budget after we already released it. All right, moving in.
Thank you so much for just itemizing them for us really clearly. Thank you.
You're welcome. So moving into the next slide here, just kind of doing a real quick illustration of some of the fiscal goals that are already listed in the budget, but they're listed in the itemized budget accounts within the appropriate funds. But areas of focus to achieve some of the goals that we have set forth. The information technology item here lists an IT strategic plan update. The last time the township had an IT strategic plan completed was in 2014. As you all know, we did utilize funds that were budgeted in 2022 to conduct a vulnerability assessment. We used the funds that were allotted for this vulnerability assessment in the amount of $10,000 to actually have a more strategic, comprehensive assessment completed of our information technology environment. That report has been completed. In the near future, I intend to schedule an executive session so the board can receive those details from the consultant in a exec session to just allow for those vulnerabilities in the personnel items that need to be further discussed at a future time. But for now, what I'm comfortable putting forth at this point in time is a request for funds that would allow us to bring in an IT specialist position to help reduce the time and attention and focus to the IT needs that we find that our patrol officers are investing, that we find that our engineers are investing, including myself as the manager investing time, when just those three examples hopefully illustrate that our time should be spent elsewhere. And having an IT specialist here to kind of troubleshoot on demand these IT needs, but also serve as a liaison to our consultant that we currently use, Hinton and Associates. The model the township currently has is referred to as a master provider service, master provider service. James, did I get that correct?
Master
Yeah,
provider service.
MPS. So, and so that model is essentially that we utilize a consultant, and their primary focus is to ensure that our IT infrastructure and that our cybersecurity needs are being addressed. But the day-to-day setup for any employee one-on-one troubleshooting needs are often delayed. And it's not a result of them failing to meet their scope of work. It's a result of just how our current contract is with them. Also identified in the report, the IT report, is IT governance, a need to have IT policies that really govern what we should or shouldn't be doing at an employee level. Again, some of this information will be further explored and detailed in a separate meeting. The human resources. So Ferguson Township, and I have here in the presentation, in 2013 we had 59 full-time employees. In 2023, rolling into the new year, we'll have 65 employees. That averages about 1 employee every 2 years. We recently, and when I say recent, in 2017, we created a human resource administrator position. And that individual keeps very busy with just the hiring and being able to do transactional work. Now that we have, and I'll talk a little bit more, we have now a second union, and responding to the needs and concerns and managing that appropriately alongside with managing our compensation, it really does create a gap. Even when our HR administrator is running in circles and getting it done, there's a need for another level of support. And then with finance, you'll see here we have identified an accounts receivable position, opportunities to evaluate existing and develop new policies, procedure, and process that we can then educate and help support other employees with that information on process and policies. And then Public Works, we do have, I think it's no surprise to the board, Park Hills Drainage Way improvements, the Northland Mobility implementation for project on Blue Course Drive, Pine Grove Mills Bike and Safety Project, and streetlight improvements, just to name a few. So here's an illustration of the org chart from 2013. It really doesn't look very different. 10 years ago, this is the org chart that we had. And while I don't have an illustration of it, I have it here printed. Our expenditures and revenues weren't actually far off from where they are today. And our beginning fund balance in 2013 was just maybe, I think, around 6 million. And our ending general fund balance, our beginning general fund balance in 2013 was around 6 million. And our ending general fund balance in 2013 was about 4.1 million. And I reference that because that's very similar to what you'll find in the budget that's proposed to you today.
And would one difference in the budget be that the stormwater fee is not shown in those numbers, or it is? Sorry, I still don't quite understand the structure of the budget.
We'll
And
talk
we can
more
get
about
into
that
it
when we
later.
get
Okay,
into the
very
sections.
good.
I'm just kind
Yep.
of doing an over, rather than just tell you like the numbers.
Yep.
I'm trying to
I
associate
love it.
numbers
Thank you.
with some
yeah,
context.
You know me, I'm so curious.
But
Thank
yeah,
you.
no, that's
Yeah.
a great question.
Thanks.
So I wanted to give you that illustration
Yes,
just
appreciate-
to
I really
acknowledge.
appreciate that.
And so moving into the next slide, you'll see a smaller version of that same org chart, but some concepts that I think we really have to give some consideration to, that I would I bring to your attention that for you to give some consideration to. There's been an increase in population, residential, mixed use, and student housing. I think that's no surprise. When I was previously preparing for another presentation, I looked up the census to see what the population was in 1990. We had about under 10,000, between 9,000 and 10,000 of a population size in 1990. And then you jump to 2010, and I believe it was about maybe a little under 14,000, give or take. So that's 2010, and then by 2020, we've got a little over 19,000. So we've had growth in our population size. And then I have some examples too that I think are most notable. While the tax base increases slightly, not in the same way that it would if only residential properties were built out. We have the yards that was constructed, the heights, we have sheets, and then it's also notable to identify that construction is happening on the West College development, and in review is the 1004 West College Avenue. So, and I'll just move in before I expand. We also note here the increase in development specifically, but with an idea or further concept to explore is the impact on demand for service delivery and the operational cost that comes with the increased demand for service delivery, the increased maintenance on infrastructure. There's an interconnectedness here with all of these pieces as we grow. For example, as our police department gets more calls to respond to concerns expressed in some of our areas that have recently been developed, that comes with consideration, whether it be recent history in the present or in the future, consideration to additional staff or additional items to ensure that safety is being prioritized when they're out prioritizing safety for our community. And of course, I think that, you know, another concept to explore as you're hearing budget updates is the transition in leadership. Former manager Mark Kunkel, I believe his tenure here at the township started in 1986, and he retired in 2017. And if you start to explore the dates, his tenure here at the township started in 1986. We had a population under 10,000 in 1990. By 2000, he'd been here about 15 years and really, from what I understand, thriving with, you know, and doing great public servant work, leadership and work here in the township. And so the systems were really effective and perhaps even efficient at that time. And then he retired there in 2017, and we had David Probolka as our township manager from 2017 to 2022, and he did things that I think that I may never do in my career. I mean, I could aspire to do that, but, you know, building a public works building and going through the process that one goes through as the administrator of a township to get that public works building constructed and get the loan needed. He was able to move forward a stormwater fee and get it ready for implementation because he had the foresight to see that the maintenance of our infrastructure of approximately 100 linear road miles, he knew that we just didn't have the revenue to be able to manage that infrastructure maintenance long term. And so implementing this stormwater fee was a way to kind of manage that expenditure. And he did it. And now you have me. And something that I think I've shared with the board and we've had some conversations is really prioritizing goal number 5 in the strategic plan, which is best management operations. And so I've been evaluating all of this and thinking about the interconnected piece here. And of course, I think most notably as well, the transition from 1 to 2 union contracts that need to be managed. And with that comes a great deal of attention and time and focus, overall resources, but admittedly risk and some liability when the wrong things aren't right, or how do I want to say this? When things aren't managed in the best way to minimize risk. And those are the level of concerns that, oftentimes warrant the involvement of a solicitor and can become quite costly. So I wanted to just, again, bringing this to the forefront for your consideration as you are tasked with responding to the budget requests and needs. Moving to the next slide. Again, it's already in the message that I provided when we delivered the budget. You'll see here the common local government challenges. We're not alone, but it's not uncommon to work with municipalities, as it was even shared, I think, in our conversations with GovHR, Charlene Stevens, that many local government entities are now assessing and evaluating their processes and their workflows and trying to increase that level of efficiency. And when I think of financial resiliency, one thing I'm thinking of isn't just keeping the number low, but ensuring that we have the assets and the equipment and the ability to be able to navigate difficult economical challenges in a very cost-effective manner. Of course, ransom and malware attacks, we're seeing that number increase across the United States. And aging infrastructure, we're seeing that infrastructure, some municipalities are more fortunate than others. We are quite fortunate in that we have a system that is quite effective and responsive to the needs of our infrastructure. And then there are just other challenges that I would consider the macro external forces right now that townships, for-profit businesses, nonprofit organizations are all facing right now, which is the low recruitment, the labor shortage, the inflation, and the consumer price index, and all of those really play into our ability to have access to materials, our scheduling, our ability to be responsive to the needs of our community. And so when I was giving a little bit of thought here too, when I think about this interconnected piece, I think if we look at the police department and we think, well, of course we support police, of course we want to ensure that they have what they need when they're out patrolling and responding to the needs of our community. Giving them the support it looks differently, especially when you're sitting in the seat that I have the privilege and an honor to sit in. It's, looking at the request for SUVs and ensuring that yes, they have over 100,000 miles of on the vehicles that need to be replaced. It's not just understanding that we need to ensure there are funds there so they can patrol in SUVs that are maintained and safe, but it's also ensuring that we have the human resource function and that we have the staff that's able to respond to the needs of our officers, so they're not worrying about any concerns that are internal or responding to any problems that could just be managed, or that we don't have patrol officers or Sergeant Hendrick responding to IT matters or technicalities, because his time is best served to be able to respond to the needs of our community and prioritize safety. I have to say, they do it. They do it, and they say, I don't want to argue, Centrise, this is what we'll do, we'll make it work, just letting you know. I've heard those words so much that I can't help but use them as an example. So they're ready to do it. That's what's great about our team here at Ferguson Township. We'll figure out the workaround. But in the seat that I have the privilege to sit in, I don't want to see anything bubble up, right? We had a director recently use the analogy of the frog in the boiling pot. I don't know if anyone's ever heard
that analogy.
Yeah, I know. When I visualize the analogy, it makes me kind of sick to my stomach, but it's true, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's true. When you think about it and at a humanistic level, it's very like, oh my gosh. But when you think about how it's actually affecting and the impact, slow strain over time, so, but anyways.
I have a question about that. I'm sorry, I'm going to butt in there. Also, you're saying, though, the idea of somebody who's on who's trained as a police officer and is working under contract in a union, it's like, maybe it's not the best use of their time to serving as an IT professional who's not gonna be under that contract. Of course confidential, but not under that contract, right? They would not be, it's not a police officer IT person.
No.
Right? It's for the
So
whole
that's not,
organization.
no, it's for
So,
the
like,
entire
it's
organization.
better use of professional and legal, like, it's just properly organized, I guess, that thought of using an IT professional for IT and not using that person who's a union police officer.
Right, right.
for
Yes,
IT,
yes.
you
I mean,
know?
but there again, I mean, while we could be
Et cetera.
experiencing something
Could.
different, right?
Yeah.
They could be filing a grievance because they're, yeah, but they don't, and
Yeah.
that's great.
Yeah.
But as your manager, I can't operate that's always
Yeah.
going to be the
Yeah.
case, right? The
Just-
reality of it is
Right.
yeah, but
Yeah, I'm just sorry, just kind
Yeah.
of like reading through the lines there and seeing like that, I don't know.
yeah,
Seems like
yeah, that's a good point.
best. Okay.
hmm And so, yeah, just kind of putting into perspective, supporting, and I used police as an example, but really it could be any
Anybody, of
department,
course,
right?
yes.
It's every
Engineering, et
department,
cetera.
right?
Exactly.
And then, of course, I have the Pine Grove Mills mobility study here because just putting into perspective that as we look to see how we can revitalize a village like Pine Grove Mills, and it's been really refreshing to see, a municipality like Ferguson Township really want to invest into a community to better serve the residents that live nearby and ensure that villages like Pine Grove aren't dying. That does come with a bit of a cost, and I just, it's important that the board see that. In the next slide, there's just a quick itemization of approximate numbers that you'll find in the budget as you're reviewing them. Pine Grove Mills mobility improvements, the "and" there is a typo. And so we have about 1.6 million. We have the Northland Mobility Project on Blue Course Drive, which include the Blue Course Drive project includes a series of different activities that accumulates to 900,000, and the Park Hills Drainage Way improvement that's carried over from this year, a little under 2 million, and then we have some park improvements that we have totaling about 1.8 million.
This year, Centuries.
This year. And so,
Cecil Irvin is included in that.
yes, it was. So here's just another, while I was giving you a bird's eye view there in the slide before, this slide is a breakdown of the Pine Grove Mills and the itemized areas of cost. They add up quickly. We are so quick to be responsive. We have a great team. Your director of public works is quick to say, yes, we can do that, and we can do that. We want to do that. We also have to just bring to your attention that we do it.
Yeah.
These things are costly. We do have a grant, and I have something
Right.
here where I'm going to come back and talk about the
Right.
grant. So
We do
it's
have
the next.
grants, I'm keeping track of these things. We have grants,
Mhm.
and these are, yes.
So we're going
We'll
to go
talk
into the
about
next
that.
slide,
Yeah.
and you'll see that we
Thanks.
actually have about 2.8 million of grants
Yeah.
or alternative funding.
Right.
Should we be able, with the assumption that we're able to collect all those grants because we're able to move everything forward as anticipated.
Is the Cecil
oh,
Irvin
can you
grant
yeah.
386, but the whole project is 800? Is that I thought the whole grant you were requesting was 800 on that.
So we'll get into
Okay,
that,
sorry.
actually,
Okay,
in
yeah.
the Fund 34
Yep.
Parks is
Thanks.
an item that'll be reviewed today.
Thanks.
So we're just giving you a bird's
Yeah.
eye view
Sorry.
of some of these
Yep,
things,
yep.
as we're soon here to wrap up, so it won't
Interested in
elaborate
that
too
grant
much.
money.
Right,
Can't
yeah.
help but looking at that grant money. Yeah,
Right,
sorry.
and so we have the grants here itemized
Thank
for
you.
some of these projects.
I mean, that's fantastic, not to jump forward, that's wonderful, that's fantastic.
So we're doing our part, right? Like as
Yes.
we are trying to be responsive to the increased levels of service and the demands as we see the growth happening in the township and the board having requests to want to do these great things, these great initiatives. Staff is equally, motivated to be able to produce the work to get the initiatives completed, but also trying to carve some time out and ensure that we have some grants and some alternative funding. So I'll move in here. I'm not going to elaborate too much here on this. I will just point out that oftentimes I think this is an under-referenced tool. This is
I can see why.
as I started really getting myself oriented with the budget, and Eric will certainly dive into this a little bit more.
Thanks.
this, yeah, this,
I'm glad that you know how to use that tool. I'm sure it's very valuable, and thank you for bringing it to our attention.
yes, it really breaks down where transfers in from the general fund are going for each fund. And I think that's an important part and to follow with questions to follow up with. That's what I'll also say. So I'll kind of skip to the next slide. And just do a real quick overview here. What we're looking at is the general fund. The beginning balance for the projected 2023 is 6.1, and the ending projected fund balance is 4.1 and some change, 4.1 million. So what this means, or what this says, is that we have healthy fund balances. And generally, I'm sure you all have experienced this more times than I have, and that what's being projected, even as our beginning fund balance, oftentimes is much lower than what the actual is, right? Because we're assuming we're spending the dollars that were budgeted, and oftentimes by the end of the year, we really don't. And so our actual beginning fund balance in the general fund is higher. But a very conservative approach that we take is to give you the projected beginning general fund balance, assuming we spend everything remaining left to spend in the budget. Okay. We rarely do, but that doesn't mean that we couldn't. Okay. And so I also want to point out, when I say healthy fund balances, that's a positive. I also want to acknowledge that 4.1 million ending, projected general fund ending balance also says we have about 26% of our expenditures, 26% of our general fund to offset expenditures. Like if we needed to be able just to live on general fund, we could do that. And it's recommended that we have a 25% fund balance of our expenditures. We have a 26%. So we're right on the cusp, which is why I'm motivated here to break these things down and really bring to the forefront everything from, yes, we are asking for these requests, and they are costly. They also are interconnected to help ensure that we are having that resiliency.
Just so also though, just question/comment. Isn't it true that we are right now midstream or maybe finished stream with this budget? I don't know, with the pine, so many pine things. Park Hills Drainage Way. With the Park Hills Drainage Way, that was a deferred project for 20 plus years, right?
Yeah.
So like we're midstream absorbing a deferred 20-year deferred project. Like
Right.
that shouldn't be overlooked by anyone. So that's accurate to say that, right? Is this?
It'd be accurate to say 30 or 40 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I've been here 24 and there was a plan on the books 10
way
years before that.
Okay. So, and then is this the final, like, are we seeing the final impacts of that? Where did that fall in the budget? This year, next year? I know it was like, right, design,
It was
construction. Yeah.
budgeted for last
Yep.
year, and we
Yep.
were able to move through segments of
Yep.
the project.
Yeah.
Much of the construction of the project is moved
Okay.
into 2023,
Okay,
which
so
is
we're
an
still
actual
seeing-
great example of why our beginning fund balance will look lower
Yeah.
than what it
Right.
actually will
Okay.
be,
Right.
but it is.
So we're still seeing the impact as it is right now because it was brought forward.
Right.
Yep.
And in some ways, another way to break this out, again, my goal here isn't to influence you to think any one way, it's to bring all of this out.
Right.
So you're thinking about all of it. One way to look at that is that, when I think about the Pine Grove Mills, this is kind of like a, one and done. When you get these improvements done, the goals that have been established for the Pine Grove Mills mobility is done.
Which is also majorly deferred because when did the streetlight project start? Because it was maybe during your tenure.
Right.
Yeah, so design or construction?
Well,
because-
just the idea of like, they were saving money for it and they had their own fund.
Oh my
and-
goodness,
Yeah.
That's
like-
Fund 33.
25 years?
Sorry to
But-
derail us, another deferred project, yeah.
Just at some point, and I don't know if this is that point, but because we're looking at, say, general fund, and those totals and the balance that will carry over projected, I just want to be be sure that everybody, including maybe the new
Me,
board member who's watching,
yes.
are understanding where we're talking about the general fund balance versus special revenue funds. So if we're
Yes.
talking about the Park Hills
Good point.
Drainage Way, where is the impact on the general fund?
Yeah,
So I just don't want to
Yeah.
estimate everybody's understanding of
Right.
the different
Good point. Thanks.
funds as we move through that. So
Right.
just wherever you think is helpful for anybody or.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm gonna just
Thanks.
focus here. Yeah, no, that's a great point. And Eric's gonna dive into to the general fund, or excuse me, to the fund balances. And then we're
Okay.
going to acknowledge these revenues and expenditures very specifically like you always have, right? In the level of detail that we have in the past.
Right.
Right now, I'm just bringing up, because the general fund balance is generally where folks say, the recommendation is that you stay 25% of your expenditures you should maintain in your general fund. We're at 26%. That's
Okay.
that's the underlying
Gotcha.
message here, right? The other funds are operating based on a system of and I don't want to get in and confuse you. I'm going to let Eric go into those details,
Good.
and then please bring out all of those questions to the
Gotcha. So
forefront.
here's that
Kind of-
previous table.
Right, so he'll do an overview of I have page 28 on my thing.
Right, yeah. Eric will go through and can certainly respond in detail
Okay,
to
that's
those.
what I
Yeah.
was looking for,
Yeah,
is
I'm
just
just
kind
doing
of
an overview, right? Instead of just throw out a bunch of numbers, it is a little warm. We like to go to keep it lively, right?
Yeah.
All right, and so
It's
I'll
not
wrap
us,
up with
we're-
two more slides,
Thanks.
and then we are done here with my overview and my
Thanks.
introduction to the budget. So, again, this is just a little bit of a different approach to give you some things to think about. The budget is presented to you to reflect the policies and the requests from the board and the interest of prioritizing operational efficiency within our practices. Everything is left to the board, and we appreciate your time and your attention and your consideration. Ultimately, we also just want to say, here are some considerations, and we'll close out with that.
Thank you.
As you move forward, you could do nothing, and we could keep moving forward. 2, we could do some budget cuts, and at the end of the presentation tomorrow evening, if the board would say, yes, we want staff to go ahead and make recommendations just to cut, we've already identified areas that we can say, okay, we can cut, and we've already identified those areas. Step 3, or item 3 for consideration, maybe like a step down approach to the way that we are doing our maintenance during this potential economic decline, maybe for 2 to 3 years, kind of look at how we're managing our maintenance, understanding that there's potential for long-term cost to deferring maintenance. And unlike the other municipalities in the center region, we have 100 miles of linear roads to maintain. That is what will always separate us from them.
Yes.
So I will say step down approach is certainly something to consider while we're in this potential economic decline, but also I wouldn't recommend that as a long-term sustainable approach. And of course, I don't even want to say the idea of consideration, but as you know, number 4 is listed there. It's always something someone can consider. It's not a recommendation. Yeah. And then you could also, during this time, if there are concerns, folks can also think about just like a targeted cap, right? Like, what's the percentage you might really want staff just to focus on moving forward? So again, that is all that I have. There's a little bit more information that we can talk about the step down approach tomorrow evening if there are questions or interest with that. But I just thank you for your time and your willingness to hear these thoughts.
Yeah, so just going, well, there's this slide, and then I guess the previous slide too. So I guess I'm just not quite clear on where you would present something like, say, number 2, budget cuts that you all have identified that may be the best thing. So would you be presenting those as we go along, or would we have to maybe identify the right things?
No,
That's
so
what
I see what you're saying. That's a great question. No, it's not so here's what I would say. I would say flat. I mean, I encourage you to do the process you've always done. Like, if something is of interest and you want to further discuss it, let's do that, right? I want you to still flag anything that you want to further discuss. And then we could do it before you discuss the flagged items or after. I just want you all to know that if the goal is just to see the number of the expenditure amount reduced, we would really appreciate the opportunity just to say, okay, here's where we think would be ideal to cut if we have to cut, because that's the priority and focus for the 2023 operating budget.
So it'll be a group effort, and we can ask them in advance, could you provide your thoughts on overall cuts generally?
That's what I'm
Yep.
asking, and I
Yeah.
think this goes back to how we proceeded with the COG budget. That's the most recent thing we've done, is we said, can you
Yeah.
come back to us with
Right.
items with your expertise? Because we certainly can't
Yeah.
be going through saying, well, this printer, I'm sure, could last another
Right.
year. But you know that. So if you can come and present those items that you've already identified as we go through those specific funds and budget cost centers, I think that would be extremely helpful. And then I guess also that step down, if that process, so I'm not going to pretend that I know what you're suggesting there, but if you can explore that as we go through those different funds as well. So say if we're in one of these things, okay, if you
Parks
wish to
fund,
look at.
Social urban, we might have a
Yes,
grant, we
a
shouldn't
step
do
down,
that cut,
yes.
but this thing we might
Yeah,
cut, the
yeah.
compost toilet, which we always, oh, that's in the SIP we bump.
Right. I know, I heard to look for that. So I think that is just maybe a more efficient, maybe very clear cut way to
Yeah.
approach that without relying on us to be able to say,
Yeah.
We would happily do that. And tomorrow is when we review the public works. And so if you are okay with it, we can just open with that idea and present and elaborate a little bit more about what a
Give
step
us
down
hints
approach
as we
might
move
look like.
through
Mhm.
the roads and whatnot.
Okay.
A quick question on that. So it really piqued my interest when you were talking about that, because also I've been kind of, as a side hobby, studying how zoning can drive income and expenditures. And then I was thinking about how each of the municipalities are in a different situation with that. Like, if you look at Patton and College, they have a high degree of commercial development and then like various balances of residential development. And my understanding is commercial development typically you need less services for that typically, like you were hitting on, and how residential development you need more services, but you also have the income tax, so that also then relates to your tax strategy. So I've been thinking about these kinds of things, and in that, one of the things that came up was the linear road miles and how it kind of drives our public works budget, and how other municipalities have fewer linear road miles, but I didn't know how many fewer. So, do you all, or does the region, or does anybody talk about these things so we all, robustly together can participate in doing the best for our own municipalities?
Yeah, Madam Chair, if it's possible, I could follow up, the Director of Planning and Zoning and I could come up
Yeah.
with a response and then present or share with you at the beginning of the next meeting. I only suggest that because
Not now, we're
Right,
not even gonna
yes,
talk about
okay.
it. I just wanted to
Mhm,
quickly say,
yeah.
we talked about it in strategic planning,
Mhm.
a little
Right.
teeny tiny bit, but it's the kind of thing we kind of never talk about. But in terms of the strategies, longer term strategies are thinking about how we want our income and expenditures to look that relate to
Yeah.
that. So, yeah.
It's a great conversation.
Yeah. So,
And then I also
yeah.
just want to share that CNET will have to leave by 5 p.m.
Oh.
So while we're scheduled, I think till 4, I just want to
Like
share
4.
with you that we'll still be streaming on YouTube.
I,
We won't be live
I think we're
after
gonna be
5.
out of here on time.
I think so too, but
Am
I-
I just imagining this?
Today? Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I wanted to share
Thank
that.
you.
I wanted to
Thank
say
you.
that earlier in my opening,
Thank
but I
you.
forgot.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah, we
Yeah,
are.
thank you. All right. Okay, so where are we going next? Are we going to Eric Anderson, Finance Director?
Sure.
Alrighty, and thank you so much, Manager Martin. Wonderful overview, loved the context, it was great, thank you. All right,
Thank you.
thank you.
The 2 pages, 28 and 29, which are the summary pages, are, in my opinion, it's like a dashboard. It's got all the information that you need to see on a macro level. And how it's laid out on page 28, it shows the 21 actual, the 22 budget, what we think 22 will end up with, and then 23 budget. And it's done by each fund. On the first column, the first two blocks, cells, if you want to call it blocks, the first one says all funds. That includes the Tudic Trust and the police and non-uniform pension plans. Below that it says all governmental funds. That does not include Tudic Trust or the pension plans. So the governmental funds are basically our operations. Whereas the trust funds are a separate item that are really not part of the township. Below that is a breakdown by fund and actually by group. So the general fund has its own group because that's a separate fund all on its own. And then they have a group called special revenue funds. And the reason they're called special revenue funds is there's some other form of revenue generation other than taxes. So you have the street light fund, the hydrant fund, now we have the stormwater fund, which is a fee, and liquid fuels. Liquid fuels gets money from the state. The next group is debt service. Some places have a lot of debt service funds, we just have one, and that's to pay our bond payments every year for the Public Works building. On the right-hand side, that column starts out with capital projects fund, so that's all our capital funds, including, ag preservation, capital reserve, the regional projects, TIF, Pine Grove Mills, park improvement, and then following that is the trust funds, which are the breakdown of police pension, non-uniform pension, and Tutor Trust. So it gives you basically a 3-year look at what we expect those individual funds plus a summary is going to end up. So it's a great overview for that. Now the next page, which is a breakdown of 1 year, it's only 23 budget, doesn't include 21 or 22. We start at what we estimate our fund balances to begin at, and it's split out by each fund and each group. You can see how the colors and so forth and how they're broken down. So each revenue item is basically a department. So we break it down by specific categories, if you will. Federal money, state money, local money, how much are we charging, what kind of rent we're getting, interest, that kind of thing, real estate taxes, income taxes, transfer taxes. And each fund shows how much, they're gonna get. For example, if you take a look at Fund 02, which is our streetlight fund, there's another assessment, so that's a streetlight assessment, and then there's a little bit of interest. And you can follow it over, and before you hit trust funds, there's a summary, total government funds, so that gives you an idea of each line item, and it sums up to the total. Down below, similar thing, only it's on the expenditure side. We're looking at, government general government, which includes engineering, finance, tax, administration, legal. Then you have buildings, regional services, which includes mostly COG, but there's a couple other items in there. Public safety is just police. Planning and zoning is just planning and zoning, and does include regional planning. Public works, that's roads, anything related to public works, except stormwater in there. Stormwater's in there as well. Transportation, that's CATA. Libraries, Schlow library. Community development, that's the individual things that we're trying to promote, like economic development. Natural resource conservation, and you'll get into these in detail. Parks and Rec, that does include COG, street trees, debt service. Now that debt service in the general fund is just interest on our escrows. But you look over to Fund 16, you can see we're going to pay $390,000 for the bond payment. Workers' comp, employee benefits, the big number there is health insurance and FICA tax, and then transfers out. So if you look at, and I'm going to break this out for you see, because there's really the only place you can see it like this. On the expenditures under general fund, there's a transfer out of $3,943,233. If you go up to the transfers in under revenue, there's a breakdown of where all that money's going. So 450,000 goes to stormwater fund to make sure that that ends up with a positive balance. 300,000 is going to Fund 16 to help pay for the debt. 10,000 to ag preservation. Fund 30 is 975,000, that's your capital equipment. Fund 32 is TIF, and that's a calculation that Centrise will get into later on. And Fund 34 is our parks. So add those all together, you get the same amount. That's what the general fund is paying out to the other funds. Okay with that?
Thank you. Yep.
Go to revenue. I guess we'll do a breakdown of revenue. That begins on page 47. So each line, each account has its own 3-year look-see, if you want to call it that. 21, 22 budget, 22 projected, 23 budget. Real estate taxes, we have a low, we're 2.422 mils, one of the lowest in the region. And the reason that we're allowed to have it that low, or able to leave it that low, is that we have home rule in that we have income tax rates and transfer tax. That makes up the majority of our money. So you can see, and I threw a little chart in there I try to do every year just to get a sample of what's going on in the region. You can see some of these houses, it's hard for anybody to afford living here. And it's been going up a little bit. The assessed value's been going up a little bit. On page 48, there's a chart that shows what, in the past X number of years, what the assessed value is going up, how much it's changed, what our tax rates are, or total taxes, and the change there. So that, it gives you a good historical view of the township as it's growing. There are some delinquent taxes we get from the county. There's clean and green, it's a rare thing when somebody gets out of clean and green, they have to pay the taxes back. So that's what that's all about. So the transfer tax, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about. That's 301010. Everybody's aware that the mortgage rates are increasing substantially. And in fact, the county said there's not a whole lot of activity happening now because of that, and that we should really consider those effects on our budget next year. I'll leave that up to you folks if you want to consider, changing that. We are just going to make the budget this year, so that 1.5 million is dead on for 22. I'm not sure about 23 because of the mortgage rates. EIT, we are growing, township's growing, and more employers and more employees that live here. That is our main, by far, our main source of revenue, $7 million. And then there's a table on page 49 as well. It shows how we've been growing over the years.
Okay, so that's really a significant income increase.
Yeah.
So how does that relate to an expectation of growth in spending? Is that the jackpot question? For us, I mean, right? I mean, if it's people that just have higher incomes, then not necessarily if it's more people. So you'd have to look at the population growth and that together.
Population growth is a key number, and the fact that people are getting paid more.
Right.
The increase in wages is not that big of an effect. It's not, like if you have one person more to the wages, that's a lot more than somebody getting a $10 raise. So
Right.
the growth of the population is the key driver. Local services tax, that's been pretty consistent. That was a $52 fee that they put on for fire and emergency services. School gets part of that. They get $5. We get the remaining 47. Then you go on to licenses and permits. Not a whole lot of money there. Comcast, we do get a fair amount, but Comcast, people are going to online TV as opposed to cable, so that number is dropping a little bit. Chantel, that's the new, that was Windstream, I believe. Now it's with Chantel. We do have a little fee for cellular franchise. Municipal liens, nothing there budgeted. Sign renewals, we charge for people to put signs up on their building and along their real, roadway and so forth. Conditional use, small amount of money. Driveway permits, if somebody wants to put a driveway in, they get a permit. Same with pave cuts, if you want to cut the road, the curb to get into their driveway, there's a fee. Fiber optic license fees, those are agreements that we have with people using our right, or companies using our right of way. DUI fines, that would be the county stuff. False alarm fees, but they've been better. I mean, there was a time when the false alarm fees were relatively high because a bank or so forth, a branch would have multiple alarms, bringing the cops out every time, and so it was like a progressive fee, and that's come down a lot. You don't seem to have that anymore. Of course, we have we always have parking tickets, snow and weed violations. Now with the new enforcement officer, that might go up.
More people on the job.
Yeah. Interest, I think interest we're gonna do well next year, because, everybody knows the rates are going up, so therefore we're gonna take advantage of that in any money that we have invested. So we pretty much double it, more than double it. There's COG, they have, through that agreement that they pay us every year, until the end of the lease. Federal grants, it's under federal grants because it is kind of a federal money, but it comes from the state, so that's Ryan's DUI money coming in. And this next one, I'd like to bring out, the 350-1050 COVID funding. So even though we got the money, we got half the money in 21, and we got half the money in 22, in 21, because we didn't spend it, and it's a type of grant that if you don't spend it, you lose it. The auditors deferred that money, that revenue stream, until we actually spend it. So we're budgeting in 22 to spend a little bit, and then 23 to spend the remaining balance. So when we go to our financials in 23, we're gonna show that revenue coming in to match the budget. And that will be the end of the COVID money. Dave has a question.
Ask a question. Yeah, so that deadlines make me panicky. Like, are we gonna be able to spend that in time and where everything is fine?
So we passed a resolution this year, and we are, when we report next year, we will have used revenue replacement.
Okay.
So
Yep,
we will
I
not be
remember that.
tied to any deadline
Okay,
per the legislation.
Great.
Because we are,
all right,
we are going to take care of it.
but that's why it's coming in those years. Okay.
Right, so we're
Thank
okay
you.
there. But Eric, I do have a question. I
We're gonna
recall
allocate
that-
it to police salaries.
Yeah, well, all salaries, but yeah. So
I mean,
Eric,
the COVID money will be.
Slow it down,
Right.
slow it
Yeah.
down.
Will be, the feds will, we're gonna claim it as police salaries in the federal portal.
Okay, gotcha.
Doesn't mean so in lieu of that frees up that same amount of money for
Right.
other things,
Right.
which is up to the board.
It's a
on how they
reporting
spend
for
it.
the feds kind of thing.
compliance. Yeah, and you might recall that we were retained as Zelenoski and
The experts,
Axelrod, and
yes.
Kim Stank is the individual that's providing assistance, technical assistance to the board, and this was her recommendation.
Thank you, I remember, it seems like years ago we did that, and it was like
Yeah.
the last couple
Yeah.
meetings, so,
Yeah.
thank you.
The legislation changed in, I believe, January, February of this year, allowing
Yeah.
for this level of flexibilities for local
Yeah.
municipalities.
Thanks.
Forgive me, Madam Chair, if I could just ask
Yeah.
him a question. Eric, I recall that in a previous conversation, I did have a question, and I don't recall the response, like, I don't recall the answer. Maybe you can help me. if we were to scoot back up to account 31021, earned income tax, I recall identifying this drop.
Yeah.
And I think this may have actually been where Chair Denny was going with her question, maybe not, I don't want to assume. But in 2021, the actual earned income tax was 7.9, and then it dropped, right, in 2022. So there's about a little under 900,000 difference there. Is there a way that we can access data that could inform on why or how that dropped? I mean, it's like, I don't know, maybe like someone from the football team, or I don't know, someone moved, like 2 or 3 people moved out of Ferguson Township,
Yeah.
or something happened.
Absolutely.
And it's unexplainable at this point for me.
Wait, I didn't even notice that detail. Where is that, Centuries?
Page 48. I remember asking, and I, as we revisited it, I just realized either Eric told me and I don't remember, or,
What year?
Go up
if
to
you
the-
look at the end of page 48, 31021,
no, up.
earned income tax,
Up above that chart, yeah. Oh, no, sorry, wait, where are you?
at the bottom of page 48.
I'm, like, you all have those page numbers. I
Can you-
don't, so I'm
James,
just
can you pull
following
it up?
along.
Oh, he has
For
it there,
some reason, I
actually.
have it.
Page at the, can you zoom in perhaps?
What is the page number of the PDF?
Page 48.
Okay.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry. No, I'm the one that's creating you confusion. I apologize. I'm seeing it
I
on.
love PDFs for this. They are just
You can
stellar for
search.
this
I love
particular
search.
thing. I love it.
Were you able to find it?
I have no page numbers on the actual pages, so I'm just, along with the PDF, I'm in the link.
Okay.
I'm linked.
It's just above the comprehensive budget.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It's-
I was making it up until now, and then we had to refer back to something, and then I lost it. So what is the number in the square of the PDF in the left-hand corner up there? I can't see
Oh,
it.
page 48.
That is, hopefully when I get to that, it's gonna be there, because that is way far away from where I was. Nope.
It's
I
not
am
in?
somewhere else, so, that's
Okay.
cool. I just keep going.
Well, I don't know if you can see
No.
there.
No. Yep, that's good.
But this is an example of patience. When I said earlier to Eric, thank you, I couldn't find patient or the page numbers. Just, do you remember the review? Yeah. So, Madam Chair, if you
Yeah.
look 2021,
I see it.
Yep. So, Eric,
Thank you.
are you able to refresh my memory as to why there is that differentiation there? in
I will have to dig into it
Okay.
in detail.
Okay.
But typically, the 21 actuals are audited figures, which means they're under accrual basis, where the budget is on a cash basis. So- Yeah, so,
Okay.
they count, when you look at the audited numbers, they look at January and February of the following year as
The previous.
as a accrual to like how much you're gonna collect, or like, cause they're saying that, okay, the money for January and February are actually not for 22, they're for 21.
Right.
So
I
they include them in the prior years. And they do it every year, so it'll follow every
It'll
year.
it'll pop back up, because I was
Yeah.
looking in the table and how there wasn't any change, but it'll
It's in
change
yeah.
back magically.
It's timing
Yeah.
is what it comes
Yep,
down to,
yep,
like
yep.
of when you receive the money.
times.
Yeah.
Good. Okay.
Thank you.
so much.
Thank you. All right, we are gonna stay on time, I swear. All right, thank
We have
you.
another
Yes, please.
Yeah, we're, in the income, I'm remembering that we rent our public works building 5 or 7, anyway, it's the storage shed for the fire
Yep.
training. Is that included in here?
It
I
is
think I
in
heard
Fund
Eric
30.
mention it.
It's in Fund 30 as
As-
income,
as-
okay.
Great.
yes.
As revenue.
As
And
rent.
the lease is, I think, ending soon, or did we renew that? I think I heard it's ending soon, but maybe
We
I'm.
will look
It was a
into
10
that.
year, right?
Check it
That's
out.
an-
It
that's a
sounds,
flagged item.
it should be ending soon.
I think
don't-
25, maybe? I can look.
I don't know, maybe I'm on
It's a
like
great
township
question.
time,
We'll
which
figure it
means
out.
10 years from
Yeah.
now, who
Yeah,
knows?
but for
So-
planning purposes, Public Works would like to occupy the building, so I don't know
Oh,
if there's.
okay.
Yeah, it ends in
Okay.
September of
That
25.
would be good to notify them of that then, I think.
Yeah.
All right.
September of 25.
Yeah, we can come back.
Great.
Okay.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Okay, sure, thank you. All right, and Eric, are you,
Yeah, I'm going down to state grants, so page 54. Not much there, nothing budgeted. The winter snow agreement has increased considerably because the township added on a few road miles on College Avenue. like 10. So you can see that's going up like triple, more than triple. State police fines, we do get money back from, because we have our own police force from the state. Public utility, that's just a tax on public utilities. Liquor license, we do have liquor license fees, $300 per establishment. And then on the state aid, there's two, the next two, 355-050 and 355-070, those are pass-throughs. The money has to come into the general fund and then get distributed out. The first one, the state aid, is split between the police pension and the non-uniform pension, where the police MMO determines how much of that money is going to the police pension. Whatever's left over goes to non-uniform. Foreign fire, that's money goes to the State College Fire Relief Fund. Marcellus Shale, there's still a little bit of money coming in from Marcellus Shale. State pays us for some, the state forest lands up on the mountain. And same with game commission lands,
Is that right?
just a little bit. They don't pay, look, they pay 30%. There is some local tourism grants, 30,000, I think, I don't know off the top of my head what that is. But we do get money from the community. Penn State tax settlements in lieu of Penn State properties being taxed on real estate. Site development plan fees. And township engineer, Ron, some of his time is charged out for some of the projects he's working on. Zoning permits, when we issue. So you can track, nice thing about zoning permits on page 58 at the top, I try to keep track of like what's going on in the township with new houses and so forth, and you can see that we're definitely doing something. We're getting a lot of additions, people renovating their houses and so forth. Rental permits, that comes from the codes for anybody that's renting a property in the township. Hearing variance fees, tax.
But there was a really big, sorry to.
Yeah, go ahead.
There was a big dip in well, the actual of 21 of the zoning permits, and then the budgeted, we budgeted a lot higher than the actual in 21. I thought there was a dip, but then I'm realizing it's the same as 21. I just was interested
Yeah.
because with inflation, I was wondering about people investing. And I think zoning permits is one thing, but also the code with their new or whatever existing structure permitting, if you
Yeah.
use those in conjunction with this, you can get kind of a snapshot of that.
Yeah, that's.
Sorry to slow
yeah.
us down. Yeah, go
Yeah,
ahead.
that's as good a guess as anybody's. I mean, 35 is probably too high, obviously.
Yeah.
I think part of it was looking at Toll Brothers and see how that would affect it. It's possible. Rental permits, like we went over that. We do get paid, we'll get into this a little further with the tax, but we do get paid from the college school district for Paula's time, and it's 50% of the total cost for the tax office. And so we split the cost because we collect taxes for the school district as well as the township, and they pay us a portion of that. Tax certifications, anytime somebody's going to basically sell their house or wants to refinance, the lawyers will ask, and we charge a fee for each one of the, they want to know if the taxes are paid or not, and we'll charge a fee for that. Progress, this is police. Police charge their time for overtime for assisting with ag progress and police and Penn State football. Those are the two items there.
Is it really only 100 hours? It seems like 1,000. We're not even out there. Is it really only 100 hours?
I agree, it feels like 1,000.
Thanks.
Yeah, most of the time it's Penn State for sure. Accident reports, there's fees for that too. Health inspections, small amount of money coming in for the borough doing health inspections. Private contributions, that's the Route 45 getaways, that's a new account this year and in next year as well.
So this was the HVAC, CDICC grant.
We had 10,000 that we got, yep.
And this is the one for the infrastructure, not for the marketing?
Correct.
Okay.
Couple things I want to bring up, page 61. We do get, one thing I put in here, and I wanted, because I wanted to catch this, it was not really caught in the past. Penn Prime insurance discounts. Now, there's a couple ways I could done this, but I think this is probably, I'm hoping this is the better way, is that when we have insurance like workers' comp and so forth with Penn Prime, they give us credits and they give us discounts. And rather than net it or take the total price and deduct those discounts to get some other number that's not really reflective of the total cost, I put it in here as like an offset. So if we pay 100, just make for, these are fictitious numbers, but say our workers' comp was 200,000 and we get $100,000 credit from that. So our net is really 100,000, but if we didn't get the credit, it would be 200,000. So I didn't want to have people thinking that, well, our bill's only 100,000, it's really not. So that's where I put it here. And it's a substantial amount of money. So for this year, we took $200,000 savings by having Penn Prime, and next year we're looking at 100,000. Health insurance refunds is a similar way. Unfortunately, we're not going to get any refund this year. In the last few years, we've gotten some decent refunds for actual use of our health insurance. So COVID kind of, I think, has a huge impact on that we had some pretty big claims. Therefore, we went over our estimated costs for health insurance. So we're not going to get a refund this year, but we do expect a relatively small refund next year. Wellness grants, there's some money that we're trying to improve wellness, and Benetcon is offering us $1,000 for that. And that's all I have in general fund revenue.
Great. Thank you. Questions? Okay. Continue on. Looks like we're in general fund, public safety, and that will be Sergeant Hendrick.
Excellent. We'll start on page 97. Before we start, I also want to thank the board for their continued support from the law enforcement standpoint. Last couple of years have been very difficult for law enforcement, but it is greatly appreciated by our officers to know the board is continuously behind us. I echo those same appreciation to all the department heads and all the staff. We have a great working relationship here, and it is greatly appreciated by the police department, so thank you. We'll start on page 97. There's our structure, and we'll know how much we want to dig into this. It hasn't changed a lot. We do have a full-time ordinance officer now, which is going to be placed under zoning. We can peruse down, there's a bunch of accomplishments for this year. Probably our biggest accomplishment was on Monday into Tuesday, the guilty verdict for Miss Jean Tuggy, which is excellent for the community. A lot of hard work and time went into that, so much appreciated and a big accomplishment for this year. I'm not going to get into each one of those. I'm sure you guys can read at your own time, so we'll get down to the numbers if that works for everybody. Which begins really at the bottom of page 100 into 101. The first is the command vehicle, which we're lucky enough to house. That cost of $10,000 is shared across 7 different agencies. Again, we house it, but it is for anyone's needs at any given time. The salaries, as we skip through that, are contractual, so I'm not going to dive into that too much. All the way down into longevity pay, as we scale through that, is again contractual. Won't spend a lot of time on that. Overtime, as Eric just went through, a lot of our overtime, we're very responsible, is reimbursed overtime. So the football games, the ag days, those very essential items that we assisted and through the county are mostly reimbursed. So we do a very good job with budgeting our overtime. But with that said, obviously, being 24/7, 365, there is some money budgeted for overtime. We're also lucky enough, as Eric mentioned, to house the grant for Center County. It used to be that Eric and I were lucky enough just to have the DUI grant, but we now have all public safety grants for Center County and all agencies. So whether it's speeding, buckle up, or DUI enforcement, we have all that, and the fun paperwork that comes with it. But that is broke down on the top of page 103. Uniform equipments and purchases. One thing that is continuously evaluated with law enforcement is our ballistic vest. So you see in there that replacement of that is notated. Ballistic vests have a shelf life of 5 years, so we're constantly having to make sure that that kind of important piece of equipment is changed. A lot of the items this year in law enforcement and other places, we've had run into actually issues with obtaining them. So we've run into those difficulties, and that's notated. But that would be anticipated for new officers as well as the recurring officers, to just keep our officers with their uniforms. Continue down through office supplies, criminal investigations. You'll notice that we're pretty much keeping the budget as it was in 2022. Fuel is in there. That was unexpected change this year, which seems to hopefully be leveling off a little bit. But that is all in there. General expenses also includes our new peer-to-peer counseling program that I believe all of you are aware of, and that we took lead on, and that program is doing very well and is only growing. We're looking to add more instructors and are actually hosting training here at Ferguson Township in December. So that is one item included under the general expenditures. Also included is ammunition. That remains consistent with 2022 and 2023. Another item that was very difficult to purchase this year, but luckily we were able to make sure that we could meet our requirements for the officers in their training.
I have a question about ammunition.
Yes.
At one time, Chief Albright changed to lead-free ammunition for when you have to do euthanasia, like murder and that kind of stuff. Are you all still going with that lead-free ammunition for that?
For that circumstance, yes, for the
Yeah.
smaller other ones. Otherwise, the lead-free has proven to not work.
Yeah, understood.
But for
Yep.
22s and.
Thank you, appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
As we continue on, community relations, you'll see a slight increase this year as we come out of COVID. We are anxious and hopefully anticipating to get back out into the community as much as we can. COVID for all of us, including the police department, was difficult to get out in the community, so we expect to be out and about more. Vehicle parts will remain consistent, and I think that's part of our overall fleet plan, and that's why we're able to keep our vehicle part expenditures down. And a great job by our mechanic. Equipment maintenance, you'll see that it's going to scale to go up a little bit. That is solely from moving things around. At the bottom, the last three things you'll notice are Grade Key, Power DMS, and Axon. Those three things were in a CIP project and they've been slid over, so that's really the expenditure difference. A lot of it is the same, and I can explain that when we get to the CIP. But Grade Key will be a consistent budgetary item. That's why it was moved over. Same with Power DMS. Power DMS is going to allow us to have a consistent document place, so all our training will be signed off digitally and in one place. Right now, every time we get a new remote RMS system, we're having to change it over. Those systems eventually fail or time out. So this is a system that we're hoping we'll be able to keep better management with that. And then Axon software we will be talking about a little bit later. Batteries is another reoccurring cost. The DNA is more of a placeholder, if you will. The state lab sometimes actually is almost always way behind some of our cases. We have that in there just in case we were to have to use an outside DNA testing, we would have the funds. We're not projecting to have to use it this year.
I'm sorry, I'm just a little bit slow behind you. Could you go, we already covered the electronic equipment maintenance, right?
Let me go
It
back
was
up.
just right before batteries.
Yes.
Okay, did you hit, why the increase, like, I think what we're taking on a new equipment management software is what I think the answer is to that. Is that, did you actually say that in my mind? Is my unconscious heard it, but my conscious is just realizing it now, or?
I did not, but I'm glad to dive into that more. So currently, we are in the process, and a consultant has been hired for a new RMS system.
Okay.
So the 18,500 in there, that's more of a placeholder where we are still figuring out what we're currently going to pay the system that has failed. So that is in our case, we have to pay it. We're hoping not to.
Okay.
We are still working through that. As part of that, you'll see right underneath a consultant fee.
Yep.
We are currently looking to switch to a new RMS system, and that's why those expenditures are in there. The
Got
biggest
you.
reason for the jump is some of these items were last year in '22 over in CIP and now are moved over. So the cell
Okay.
phone, the Gray Key, and the Axon are gonna be a consistent software product that we will be having each year.
They were in the CIP, is that what you said?
Correct, at last year, the one ticket, and now
Okay,
it's
so
gonna be.
they're new costs that were moved into the budget
Correct,
this
I
year.
was just solely me
Gotcha.
moving it from one place to another in the budget, because they were now gonna consistently each year. Gray Key is the latest and greatest forensic software. It'll be a
Okay.
reoccurring cost, where it
That's
was
the
at last
one.
year was a little confusing to me.
Okay, thank you.
But it's really
Thank you
not
for reviewing
an
that.
increased ask when you
Yep.
look at the whole picture.
Thank you, thank you.
Any other questions, because I have a tendency to move
No,
through
that's
things
okay.
quickly. Okay, we'll continue down, we're now on to page 106. You'll see most of those are staying the same: communications, radio maintenance, transportation. Transportation, there's a slight increase. There was hope that the radar bill would get passed this year.
Mm.
I'm a never-ending supporter that radar is gonna come through. I was on our steps down in Harrisburg in favor of it, and it did not come to fruition.
Yeah, who's stopping that? I'm sorry, we should not get into that right now. Let's keep going on. Yeah.
The point of me bringing that up is you'll see that we're going to need to start replacing our VASCAR units, not to get too deep into that, but we're
Yeah.
the only state that uses VASCARs.
I see.
The units are not actually even made anymore because no other state is using them, so there's no money to be made. I was hoping to not have to put that in there because we'd be looking at radar, but they are
Send the
starting
bill
to
to
fail.
our representatives.
I have no comment on that.
I
So-
I was gonna point out that was something that was actually mentioned at PML this past year, is
Right.
that technology is becoming obsolete.
Okay.
We had to
So-
switch,
Thanks.
we had to switch vendors, and the time to get it is very extensive, and obviously speed enforcement, as you all know, is one of our biggest problems. So we are
Right.
going to start to replace them, because they are failing. They are extremely old machines, because they're in essence a big stopwatch. But that's why that cost is there, is we're gonna try to get ahead of the problem and replace
Okay.
them.
One question, and I don't know if this would fall in there. The speed monitoring, the electronic speed monitoring signs that flashes up the speed limit, is that where this is, or is that in another line?
That is not in this budget, it is not.
Okay, we don't have it. So we had talked before, and this is for continuity as well,
Yeah.
information and requests. So we had talked before about whenever those die out and when they're replaced, to look at solar options so that they can stay consistently charged, or more consistently charged, without somebody having to go out there and replace the batteries. So I wanted to mention that, so that that's on radar, because that was something that had been discussed with Chief Albright. And the second thing is, we've talked the last few years about getting a larger, maybe more noticeable sign, and I'll refer to the one in Lamont with the blue and red. So that had been talked about before. I don't know how the board feels about that, but it had been priced at, I want to say, $13,000 before, and we had talked about adding that in to be mobile at the highest conflict areas, and not to be a stationary sign in any one place. So I wanted your thoughts on that, and if there's been any discussion about adding something like that.
So, a two-part, the next line item is actually batteries, where it talks about the speed limit signs and the recurring cost of the batteries. So we absolutely echo your concern about going to something solar, that leads into next. I agree with you, and I think that question is a much bigger question for the next chief to address. Because if we get one of those things, it's inevitable that Pine Grove Mills will want it at the same time that Stonebridge want it, at the same time that Park Forest wants it. So I think it's a great tool. It works very well. I drive through Lamont every day, and it works as a great reminder. We just need to have a bigger strategic plan on how big we want to go with that, because I'm not certain that one machine is going to be adequate for our needs. So I do agree, but I think that's probably a conversation for the next chief.
So if we can note that as a discussion for the next CIP meeting next year, I think that would be a good time to talk about that.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Jeremy, did you have something?
I was just concerned about possible vandalism to them signs. I know out at the farm, it's fun to try to keep a sign for our business in shape because people think they can just chuck their beer bottles at
Yeah,
it
it's
just
like
for fun.
target practice for whatever
And-
weapon available.
And if they break the solar piece of the speed sign, then it's kind of like, well, that was
Yeah.
that was helpful while it lasted.
That would be very sad, but don't they also have cameras that we can like?
Yeah,
do, 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 do,
yeah.
do?
And we have the
Right.
signs up now, you know, we
Yeah.
have the flashing signs.
Didn't know if they're,
And yes, they do make
This
the
is a
signs that
confession,
have the
Jeremy.
threat deterrent with the cameras in them,
Yeah.
so.
No.
There's definitely a way to make that plan
Threat
work,
deterrent,
whatever
I
the
like
board determines their desire.
Thank you.
I'm not out
I'm good.
throwing beer bottles.
Oh, Jeremy.
Jeremy's confessing.
Jeremy's in real time. Thank you. Sorry, Sergeant, please continue.
Any other questions? All right, I think we
No,
were,
thank
completely, let's start at DNA, we'll work down, I can't remember where we were at. We were talking about radio maintenance, communications, transportation,
Yep,
and we were right at transportation.
yep, yep.
Advertising, you'll see most of these are staying the same, outside repairs, staying the same. Subscriptions, conferences are going up just slightly, just with the anticipated cost of things going up slightly. Each of those are listed, but obviously with law enforcement, there is a lot of training that comes with that. And we pride ourselves in trying to stay ahead of that. Also talked about the RMS system, that goes into the 450 contracted system, so you can see each one of those lines breaks it down. But these are different fees that we pay, keep our vehicles clean, keep everything working, the AED batteries, maintenance of that. Our CIT program is paid out of here. And the newest item at the bottom of that for $4,000, you'll see this, the newest item, the only new item in here this year, is our Center County crash team. Serious injury crashes seem to be going up. We're going to a more regional approach, so, you know, if we have one expert, State College has one expert, Spring has one expert, when there's a bad crash like there was this morning out in Spring Township, we can pull together and all our resources and give a better end product for the county. So I think this is gonna be a great program, and this is gonna offer a much better, thorough investigation when it comes to serious injury crashes.
I have a question for that. We don't have to talk about it deeply today, because it's a pretty, probably, maybe a deep policy question, but, you know, it's Center County Crash Team, so that's a countywide crash team, but the police departments are municipal. So of course, we're expected to give mutual aid, and I wouldn't want it any other way, but does the county itself provide a percentage equal to as if each of the municipalities that have no police department, do they provide any kind of support for all the aid that all the departments that are supported by individual municipal taxpayers, right? Do they make up that other portion? And that is like a super deep policy question that maybe is for Mike Pipe, but,
I think it's a simple answer that we would only represent areas that are covered with a paid municipal agency. So, for
Huh.
example, Benner, that would fall under state police's
Oh,
crash team.
state police.
Well, with that said, as you stated, we will work together, and if for some reason they were
Gotcha.
unavailable, yes, we would never leave a service on
Gotcha.
need. But Benner is a good example, and that would fall to state
It's
police. so there
mostly
would be-
state,
Correct.
gotcha. Thank
Correct.
you for that, yes.
All right, continue on, education, we did not have any requests for education this year. Academy, as always, we budget at least one officer, never knowing if there would be someone who would leave, come, go, so we have one officer budgeted for the police academy. We're now down to the non-capital equipment. We have in there rifle replacement. We have our rifles used for our TRT team, most people know as SWAT team, are aging out. Obviously, you need a rifle to be highly accurate if you ever need to use it in that situation. So those need replaced. The decibel meter stays in there because that is a key part of the ordinance that is currently written. We do not have a decibel meter that is calibrated. Therefore, we cannot enact that part of the ordinance. Trail cameras are used consistently, but the biggest notation in there would be for cell phones. Currently, Ferguson Township officers do not have work cell phones, which is very problematic. A perfect example is we had a missing person the other night. I was standing next to her sister, and I was not able to communicate with her when she went out to the field because I had no direct way except for her to send her through the dispatch center, who would call me, and then I'd call her back. And there's just many complications with that. A cell phone would give us many abilities, real time to take pictures and all these things, evidentiary purposes. So it is time to definitely look at implementing cell phones for officers, and there's many ways to do that, but we need to have a line item for it so that we can enact it this year to give them a better ability to do their duties. Any
So that's
questions?
kind of a new program.
Correct. Other agencies have work phones, and again, there's many ways to do this, whether
Yeah.
it's each officer gets a cell phone, whether we go back to having a cell phone in the car, or
Right.
whether, very many ways to do it.
Mhm.
But having a personal phone, which is exactly what I have, is not ideal, because I can't take crash scene pictures, I can't communicate people.
I
because of
wasn't
court
here for
purposes.
CIP, I can't remember if you all discussed that as coming into the budget or if it came in since CIP.
This would be something that
Can
I
we
have.
flag this one? Thank you. And also the decibel meter, could we also flag that? It's such a small amount, I barely even want to talk about it, but like there's an ordinance review pending, and even $1,000, I'd hate to invest in it if that's gonna be hot off the burner, but if it's not, then whatever. So that's why I would like to flag those things. Thank you.
Anything else? Otherwise, we can go to, I believe, the last line, which will be on page 182, unless there's any questions.
Yeah, I'm coming to the end of the section. Is that a different section, maybe?
That would be
He's looking at Fund 30?
Fund 30.
Gotcha.
Andrew brought it up briefly, but I just want to
That's
make sure that we are all on the same page for, so again, I'm seeing page 182, Fund 30.
Well, the
4.4.
PDF is 91.
PDF is 91, I'm being told.
I'm in another universe with my document. Everything is correct except for the page I don't know how I ended up here, but I am. But I'm following right along. It's just taking me a minute for
Okay.
each transition. Thank you.
We can do that tomorrow, though,
Yeah,
that's
You're
scheduled.
fine.
You want a
I
different
think it's me.
You want a different link to download?
No, I'm okay. We're fine.
But we're here,
Yeah.
so.
Thank you. Please.
And the last couple items on here, manager corrected the Ford hybrid from 80 to 90,000. And the electronics from 25 per, so it was 30 to actually 50 total. So we're clear, 50 total, not 25. And it also has electronic motorcycle. And the biggest expenditure that you'll notice on there is $75,000 for Axon body cameras. This includes absolutely everything. This is body cameras, this is virtual reality training that comes with them. This is the storage, this is our station cameras, this is pretty much everything that has to do with body cameras, tasers, and all the software comes with it. This is also going to be at least a 5-year agreement, so this would be a $75,000 project that will be recurred for at least the next 5 years. Body cameras are not going anywhere in the next forever, they're here to stay. This program basically is kind of like buying a car with a warranty. It assures that every 2.5 years we get the newest, latest, and greatest version of the body camera and the taser, so we're not spending money. It actually can save us at certain aspects. We're not having to buy replacement batteries, which are extremely expensive. It gives us cartridges that we used to have to purchase. So though it's a large item purchase, we actually are a lot of things in there that we're saving money on by agreeing to this. Other
Just
question?
one question. So, okay, so this, the new equipment, so is that what you were referring to with the plus Centuries with the additional funds for the 410,750? Yeah, the additional funds, okay. So that was an additional 25 that's not here?
Correct, so we
Okay.
would increase the Ford hybrid SUVs from 80,000 to 90,000. We would increase the electronics, accessories, and marking for 2 SUVs from 35,000 to 50,000, which would then increase the entire account from 221 to, my goodness, my math here, 25 to 220, yeah, 240, 256.
Thank you. I think you said that. I was just still trying to find my page. I wanted to make sure that I had all the right numbers. And were these both in the CIP for this year?
Yes.
These 2 vehicles, okay.
Yes, and the money in the CIP is consistent with what we're asking.
Okay.
Any more questions? All right, it looks like we are ready to move on. Thank you so much. Okay, looks like fire protection is next. Would that be Sergeant Hendricks?
Oh, yeah, we did not itemize this, no, and my page
That's COG.
numbers. Go. Eric, are you,
Yeah,
Eric's
fire
going to
protect-
do the COG.
You
Eric
want
and
me-
I'll do it together.
Yeah, okay, so, all right, yep.
So fire protection,
So, right,
Fire protection is a cog, and if you, that's under section 3, if you just wanna, like, move that down. Same with fire is anyway.
Okay, do we want to move them down to under Center Region Council of Governments then? Or Fire
Fire,
protection,
yeah.
ambulance,
And
not ambulance.
Not ambulance,
Yeah, we've always had it under public safety.
yeah.
And then emergency services is under COG.
Right.
Okay, so we'll go to ambulance services next.
So that's, well, there's a couple other things under fire as well. Page 110, we do pay a little bit of money to Warriors Mark Fire Company. That's the board decision. And also Port Matilda, if you want to continue that.
I think every year I have the same comment, which is I'm not sure about the contribution to Warriors Mark, and I am sure about the contribution to Port Matilda. And then we think about it, and it's for a small amount, and then we stay the same. So I'm just gonna say that again, probably just stay the same. I think it's a pretty small amount, but my concern is that we are really establishing a dependency there without really any kind of communication, or any kind of plan, or any kind of a strategy. And then when I start thinking about fire protection that is in COG, I start thinking about how their fire protection program is really operational, not capital, and how Half Moon is facing some issues, and Port Matilda is, and we are with service response time out here. And then I just start thinking how we should be more strategic about this conversation each year. So maybe some year, during the year, we will have a group meeting where we all talk about that with Half Moon supervisors. I haven't even talked to them about it, but like, I know they were talking about with their other COGs that they participate, and then participating there. And do we need a station out here, right, to serve out here somewhere that's an alpha joint station with something else? So lots to not talk about today. And then Warriors Mark. We're just gonna keep.
Well, I think it's important to note the history too, because one of them, and I want to say Port Matilda, was added in, right? When they were struggling
Yes,
the year
they were the
before
added in
last, 2
one.
years
Yes.
ago, they were added in because right at the time we were doing the budget,
Yes.
they had come out in the news with a
Yes.
plea for assistance, so they were added in.
Yes.
And so that needs to be noted. And then last year, we said just keep it in, because
Yeah.
last year then, they were having this financial crisis, so it was left in. So that is why that's there now. And then there had been discussion about mutual aid agreements
Yes.
with Warriors Mark. And so that's why, no, I think it was, we had talked about having an expanded Warriors Mark agreement.
I thought it was Port Matilda.
It could have been that as well, but with Warriors Mark in lieu of, or in. you
In
know,
lieu of the station.
In lieu of the station, but also in the meantime,
Right.
supporting them.
Right.
But I think,
Right.
I agree with your point of having a more strategic conversation about both of those, because
I'm not
just
even
as.
sure where Warriors Mark is. I mean, it is the vast expanse between like me and Altoona or something. It's
Yeah.
everything in between.
Well, and I don't know where they lie in proximity to the boundaries of Ferguson Township versus where Oldsburg Fire Company lies.
Oldsburg is
So,
another, yes. Yes.
they also border our municipality,
So it's bigger, and you guys will continue to talk about it. But Port Matilda is the one that responded to that brush fire in Half Moon just recently. Right? They're the ones that were out there for 2 days fighting that. Brush fire is a big, makes me nervous for out there. Anyway, okay. We're keeping those, for now, right?
I mean, I'd
And we're
flag
going-
them,
This
but-
year, we're gonna have a conversation with some fire protection folks.
Do you
Yeah.
want, so just for clarification,
Yeah.
do you want this flagged okay.
Not for
keep it.
budget. Flagged, we also have in our own heads, a flagged for policy questions.
Okay.
But typically how that then manifests is after the budget meeting, I just send a bunch of emails for consent agenda items. So it's not really well managed. But if I don't do that, then it kind of gets lost, so.
Well, would you
Yeah.
like me to flag it, and then you can motion to add this as a future agenda item?
Lisa?
I would like to flag it and have it maybe noted as a contribution we can make outside of the fire area as a donation request. So if they were to submit a donation request,
That's
then
a
we
great
could
idea.
evaluate it on those terms, because as it is in here, it's part of fire service. And that's what's making it,
Yes.
awkward and not, not clear at all about who we're supporting. So
Yeah.
not that I want to cut them off without some notice, but I'd like a request.
Yeah.
I think that would be a nice
good idea.
procedure.
And and of course, we have to make sure they understand. Are we now flagging it to continue this discussion tomorrow night, or we're just all agreeing really quickly to say, can we let them know why we're doing it? It's nothing like aggressive, it's just.
We could flag it and then
Okay.
provide
Figure
clarification
out.
as to
Okay.
what the next steps
Super,
are
super.
tomorrow.
Great,
Mhm,
okay. Flagging.
Thank you. Yep.
All right, thank you. Back to you.
Okay. Page 111, foreign fire, that's the money that we're paying out to the foreign, from the state. When we get the money, we have to pay out to the Volunteer Fire Relief Association. There's your ambulance service, Port Matilda EMS and Center Lifelink. A lot of different amounts. That's it.
The different amounts to the two ambulance
Yeah,
services?
one's 3 and one's 3,500.
Yeah, because one serves us a lot at a much, much higher rate.
Exactly.
Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Any questions? Are we on to health and welfare then?
Yes.
That is, page 119, that's the borough's health officer fees. And, health and economic, human resource contribution from ARPA money, that's it.
Good to move on.
Finance.
Yep, still
Okay,
you.
finance starts on page 70. Chart, board chart, mission statement, little budget message. Basically tells what the finance department does, tax collection, and how that works. Little notice about Springbrook and how that's our key accounting software. And we do our annual budget award and the financial report with with government finance officers, and then Laserfish. Good goals, want the strategic, how the finance department relates to the strategic plan. A little discussion about what, how many tax collection or tax bills, 11,000 bills. We did forms through Laserfish. Did all pension plan reports, Baker Tilly audit report, scanning invoices, the CIP, so forth. 23, much of the same. I do want to, and since Teresa and I have had several discussions, trying to get this ClearGov system put in place for doing the budget next year. Work with Hinton and on board with the new IT specialist. Help manage fixed assets through Springbrook for the insurance and auditors. Do the quarterly reports to the board, treasurer's report, vouchers report, insurance, and the CIP for next year. Following that, salary information, myself and then Tracy and the one new person to help out with paying bills in 23, which would be going to be really helpful.
Is that a part-time or is that
That would be a full-time job.
So that's a full-time, okay.
This would divide the line of duty between
Payroll.
payroll and accounts receivable and accounts payable.
The payroll will be split out.
And then was that the only new finance position or was there another?
That's the only one.
Okay.
Faith is coming over. She was already charged full-time to finance, but she's gonna not be split with admin next year. She'll be 100% with there was no change in cost because she was already budgeted in finance. Electronic equipment, Keystone Payroll, that's who we use for payroll. W-2s, that type of thing. HR, we also have the HR module with them, so they handle all our benefits and so forth. I want to flag one thing I just thought about as we were going through this on 402.311, the audit fees. If, since we're going to be spending more than $750,000 next year of grant money, we're going to have a single audit, so I have to add that single audit cost to the budget. I don't know what it is yet, but I'll find out.
There's a charge for spending grant money like that?
They want to make sure that
Contribution.
you're spending it and not wasting it.
So spend some more to make sure. Cool.
Yeah. Pretty much, no change. We dropped the dues and subscriptions. There's a lot we don't need to do. And I just asked them for $500 to replace my chair, $427.50. Tax office, very similar. That's Paula and her overtime. Office supplies, like I said, this is split. The school district pays half of this. Postage, we're expecting postage to go up. Advertising, that's typically tax office envelopes and letterhead and so forth. Bonding, I get bonded, and most of that money is paid for by the school for a tax collector bond. Since the dollars, the most of the money is theirs. In contracted services, we use what they call the RBA software, which is a cloud-based link to RBA system, and I think we're very pleased with it. We've had it for a long time, and it's done a really good job, and it's really economical. That's it for tax office. So debt service interest, that goes way down to page 145, for your taxes. Sure everybody's familiar with Social Security tax. That's the township's portion. Unemployment compensation, it's a limit of 10,000. We're figure 1.25% of that 10,000 for a full-time employee. So it ends up to 9,000 roughly. Pension expense, that's both the non-uniform and the police pension, and that's offset by a lot of the state money. So if you look at the chart, which is confusing to a lot of people on 146, so there's a minimum municipal obligation that we calculate every year, and it shows what the police is. Now technically, the non-uniform doesn't have one, but that's the estimate of what the township will have to pay into the non-uniform plan. So if you add those two together, you get the 611,584, which is what the budget is. And then that's offset by the state funding. So we take the money that we came in under Act 205 in revenue, and that deducts that. So our net cost for 22 would be 222,000, and 23 it'll be a little less. So that's actual township out-of-pocket costs. Insurance, not a whole lot of difference there. Just kind of tweaking a little bit between the different accounts. Public officials, E&O, you know, if you make a mistake, there's coverage for you. Police, same thing, there's coverage for police liability. Workers' comp, vehicle insurance, pretty consistent. Crimes insurance. Health insurance waivers, employee benefits, we offer 20% if somebody has the ability and chooses to have their spouse cover their health and not have the township cover it, so we'll pay them 20% of the cost of what the insurance would be. So it's a very good way to save the township money and also give the employees a little bit of benefit. Vision insurance, pretty simple. Health insurance, there's their gross number, I call it gross, on page 148. It's not cheap, there's no question about the health insurance is expensive. Health retirement savings, people save their sick time, accumulate it, and don't spend more than 6 days a year. and they have sufficient time at the township, I believe it's 5 years, they can get $500 a year toward a retirement health and savings account. Dental insurance is $45,000, life insurance, there's $80,000 coverage for each person in the non-uniform, or not, I'm not sure about the new union, but not the police, but the non-uniform staff. Employee wellness, there's a little bit of money on short-term disability as well. There's money for short-term for each person.
Excuse me, Madam Chair, can I just
Yeah.
interrupt? Eric, could you, I know there's a way that we can add in the page numbers on the side with the PDF, and I can't recall. I think as we move through with the page numbers listed, Lindsay shared with me that if you're on the website, it's a different page number. I think there's some confusion there. But if you download the PDF, then you can reference the page numbers that are provided on the agenda. And so I'm asking because I don't recall how to do
Somebody
that.
might still be struggling.
Did the page numbers show up?
No, the step that you helped me earlier
Yeah.
prior to the meeting, we go into the sidebar and click what? Sorry for this random request, but I
love
understand
Like a
there's.
little, hence why we need an IT person.
The
so
bookmark.
that-
We can get it done and saved
Right,
and sent that
In
way.
real time, this is exactly happening.
The bookmark.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah,
Okay.
so, if you pick, open up the bookmark column, whatever you wanna call it, window, you can click on
Bookmark.
those, it'll take you to pretty
the
close to
bookmark.
where we're talking, but then you still have to page through it.
Okay, so bookmark, I would identify that in, if I'm in
Bookmark
Adobe.
taxes, insurance benefits, and other.
Yeah, it's usually a little tool on the side, on the left-hand side.
It's one of the last.
Oh, it's the arrow. I have to click the arrow and then it's the bookmark. Have you all been able to find that? Okay.
Yeah, mine downloaded with page numbers, so.
Right, and that's, so you're able to follow along with the page numbers, yeah.
Why doesn't mine perform well?
Oh, I see that now too. Now that's
Is there-
also very
Require
helpful.
extra steps.
I knew there
I
was.
see the bookmarks too, that's great.
Yeah.
See how it's
Is
just.
this Adobe?
it's
There's a
so-
little arrow on
Somebody
this.
else has to help.
Okay, let me see, do you have
It's
it?
It's
okay, I
something we
was
don't
doing
know.
okay, it just took some extra searching.
The digital role player.
I like old
Here.
school PDF.
There it is.
Well, we
Oh,
had
I
hard
love
copies
this so
last
much.
year.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, admittedly, I just learned this right before the meeting.
I was
which
converted to Nitro Pro years ago, so.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
glad.
Thanks, okay, all right, back on track.
And
back on track.
Bluebeam.
Yeah.
Patty, Lisa, Jeremy, do you want me to, is there?
I'm
Okay.
good.
Okay.
Thank you.
I just,
No, I'm the only one, I'm the only one.
Are you bigger?
Thank you.
All right, so what page are we on, Eric?
On the document itself, it says 148.
Great, thank you so much.
We do offer some short-term disability to the township employees. Employee wellness, some of the refunds that we've gotten back from Penn Prime, we try to invest back into the staff and improve wellness, which helps reduce the cost of our health costs. So that's an investment. And, whoops, I didn't want to do that. Select. And then contingency, where am I at? Debt service. I mentioned
Yep,
debt service, that was just, yeah. Here, okay, so, contingency is just, in case we miss the uncommitted reserve, 49.300. We've always, whether it's right or wrong, we've always budgeted 25,000 just in case there's something that, we missed in the budget. So there's a little bit of money there, to help. We don't have to rebudget. And then, as we spoke earlier on page 150, the following, the interfund transfers, this details each item that's going out to each fund from the general fund. And I showed you on that summary sheet. The one thing I would like to expand on is the 492,032. That's a calculation based upon how much money we're getting in on real estate, how much money we're bringing in the transfer tax, how much money we're bringing into earned income tax. So those numbers are on 151. You see that table shows all the calculations and how much money is for each one, and then the total that gets sent out to the TIF fund. And then the last one is, it's a pretty big one, it's $900,000 going to the park improvement fund.
Yeah, and when you listed those off, I knew the park was gonna be the biggie.
Yeah. That's it.
We have one of the highest 5-year rolling averages of investment into the parks in the region. In terms of where on the capital? Like what we're investing in parks. All right, one, yeah. go ahead.
Just a question about the TIF calculation and where it was, where it is now, because we recalculated, what, 3 years ago for the Public Works Building Fund, when that was going through, the TIF was recalculated, and then I think it stayed the same the next year, maybe 2020, 2021, I think it was changed. And I'm trying to figure out where we are now
Okay.
versus where the original recalculation, I guess 2018.
And we're only really talking about the transfer tax component. It was
Oh, okay.
It was 60% for the longest time. Dave Babalka moved it down to 40, and and we moved back up to 50.
Okay, that's,
In
yeah.
the middle. The reason is, the transfer tax, does this. And so, do you want a stable, it's just it's a basically a subjective determination of what do you think, you want to fund the TIF.
So the percentage that we're talking about is a percentage of the transfer tax that goes into the TIF. Is that what you
That's
said?
And
correct.
only
So if
that.
we
Okay,
collected,
so-
if we
that's-
collected $1 million in transfer tax at a 50% rate, 500,000 would go to TIF.
So we would expect that if that's a tax that is gonna go down, based on what the county had said, that we would have,
Less money.
like, even if we kept the same percentage or
The-
increased it,
the-
we'd have an absolute number that was a little smaller.
Correct.
Okay, all right. Any other questions? I think we're ready to move on to Center Region Council of Governments then?
I do just want a clarification though, Eric.
Yeah.
Was there a communication that was, that came from the county recently that said that they believe that that's going to be a reduction? I don't know that I saw that communication, because I saw the numbers were pretty steady and consistent. There was a slight drop last month. So maybe that's something that you and I can flag just to follow up for a confirmation from the county, because the trend was looking stable, with 1 month showing just a slight
okay.
decline.
Yeah, this came Monday.
Okay.
Joe Davidson said
So I want to
that
better understand that. so we
his,
can
his
discuss
his
any
work
of it.
with transfers has slowed down substantially, and that he recommended that we take a look at that and see if we.
Okay,
For Elaine?
thank you so much. So that might be something
Great.
that we have to bring up in our next conversation, but we'll talk and then we'll get back.
Great, thank you, thank you. All right, looks like we are ready to move in the Center Region Council of Governments. So are we gonna review each of these separately? We had reviewed these separately in the COG budget. We're just gonna hit the totals and see how they changed maybe? Okay. And we'll start with the COG Administration Building Capital and Contingency. And with, this is a policy question, I don't wanna get into it, we're kind of getting a little bit behind, but, there's, with all the talk of the COG building ownership changing, like, that changes how it's represented in our budget and everything like that, but I actually don't. New information that's come to light makes me think that I actually don't wanna move that forward through the COG this year anyway, based on some of the answers that we're not getting. So it's maybe a non-issue anyway about the change of how it's reflected in the budget.
I'm not sure I'm
So-
following what.
Well, the COG building is currently like we rent, but then maybe they are gonna own it, so won't it change how it's reflected in our budget then, or they
Not
pay us or
currently, the
something?
Yeah.
They pay us, but
Because
then we'll
we
pay them?
gave them a bunch of money in the beginning to build it, and then, and then they're basically giving us lease payments in return.
So, and that change wouldn't be in effect for a couple of years.
Oh, okay, all right, so
So
it'll
there's-
stay the same no matter
Correct.
what.
And the
the
general
policy
forum would
was.
have to vote in
Yeah.
that that hasn't happened yet, so.
Yeah, yep, okay, yep, just,
Because we're not an enterprise operation.
right, oh boy. So, okay, so let's go ahead and move into the line item.
Right.
Can you present that?
So, yeah, and I'll just kind of go through it quickly,
Yeah.
but,
Yeah.
on page 79, account 406-530, the COG administration, we have budgeted here, 159,000 plus some change. So it does look like there's a slight decrease. And then we have the, COG building capital, about 6,000, a little over 6,000. Slight change. And then the contingency, we have budgeted at 0. And then we'll move to page 117 for the Center Regional Planning Agency.
It's easiest way to get to page 117. Yeah, you could do that, type in the number. But,
Alright,
planning.
I always go a little too fast. I don't use the bookmarks. I should though, perhaps. Alright, alright, so on page 117, Center Region Planning Agency, we have budgeted 72, a little above 72,000, which is less than what's projected for 2022.
Yeah, I remember why our share
Right.
went down, I mean, I remember that it did, but I can't remember why. And it has to do with, I think, cottage townships.
Right, it has to do with the population. So the census data was
Oh, yeah.
released and that variable in the COG formula, population, College Township had an increase in population. We had a very slight,
Right.
well, no, we had a, slight increase, but
Right.
nothing dramatic.
Temporary.
So when college, for example, so the COG formula, having the variable in population can have a pretty significant impact on the municipal
Right,
contributions.
right, thank you.
All right, so then we'll move into, let's see here, transit system, page 133. Wow, this really jumps, doesn't it?
Oh, CATA.
Yes, public, yeah. Center, let's see,
Gotcha.
Center Area Transportation
Yeah,
Authority.
Yeah.
Let's try to remember that. Okay, so.
That's a formula.
Mhm.
Well, wait, policy issues later. Gonna put that on a flagged page somewhere. Seriously, this is how it happens, and then it's just our memory, and
Right.
mine is pretty much shot for the years.
All right, so I arrived, page 133, we have budgeted a little over 100, well, 150 and
Yep.
$834,000, which is based on a formula, and
That's going up while they're cutting some of our routes, which it's not their fault, but it's still something that we have to continue to think about and look at.
yes. And then moving into page 134, Parks and Recreation, we have budgeted about 25,000 increase from last year, with about 475,683.
So can we flag this, please?
Sure. All right.
One of the main reasons I'm flagging it is we didn't talk about it as a separate COG budget yet,
Right.
which we'll do on November 15th.
Okay.
Yep, thank you.
All right, and then we have the library services on page 142.
Also, just with the park and recreation, that's all funds. I don't know if I was clear with that, because one fund is actually just called park and recreation, but like then there's aquatics and aquatics capital and et cetera. Okay, thanks, sorry.
That's okay. All right, we have a little increase here budgeted for 2023 for the library operating contribution at $511,497.
I think that's the parking, finally a parking solution.
Sorry, I'm back on
Yeah.
parks. The nature center operating went up so much. It was 26,000. And now was there somebody hired in there? I don't remember. It's 70,000 for this year's, am I reading this right?
Well.
This is nature center operating.
If we'd have gone
I just
over it, I
didn't-
probably would remember.
Okay, I just didn't recall that jump.
No, we'll have to take a look at each.
Okay, so we'll go through each of the
Yeah.
funds, okay,
Yeah,
gotcha.
On
Okay.
November 15th, in a regular meeting, we'll go over all of the parks funds for COG, which, we talked about this, and this is part of why the structure and the flow are just not working out, because everything for the COG budget should have been passed through the COG general forum with our vote before it's being passed in our budget, so we just try to really, there's a relationship there that we're exploring really deeply right now, so, yep.
We
Thanks.
flagged that.
Yep,
We flagged
flagged.
parks and
Yep.
recreation.
Yep.
And all
funds.
those funds,
Yep.
okay.
Yep.
Okay, so then, or Lisa, do you want me to go back to library services or move into?
No, I'm fine,
Okay,
yeah.
so we can move into senior citizens on page 143. And we have budgeted 63,161, which has a bit of an increase.
Yeah, that was another big increase, I thought, when that was discussed at the COG.
Yeah, flag that one
I mean-
too. It's managed under CRPR, but it probably shouldn't be because it's not, anyway, it's a county thing, et cetera, but could you flag that? Thanks.
Yes.
Yeah, I can't remember.
I know, I want to flag it because I need to go back and recall why those.
I had
jumps were
heard
there.
somewhere that we had the highest participation of senior
Might have been it.
citizens
Yeah, that-
there.
We
The
do, I'm
COG
wondering why
formula is
there's such a
different.
jump
I
in
think
the
they're-
amount.
Oh, Ferguson's
Oh.
participation rate went up,
Right.
maybe.
At least make sure the
One year-
those residents.
One year when I
yeah.
first started, it did that too, and I was like.
Well, it went up
what?
from 35,000 to 63,000,
Yeah.
but there was something else in there, I just
think
can't
it might
recall
have
right
been an
now.
additional thing. Can you flag
Yeah,
it?
yeah, I flagged it, and we can certainly explore the COG formula, because the COG formula for almost all COG programs are the same except for two, and this is one of them.
Right, this
And
is
I think this is actually based in, perhaps it's the library, I can't recall.
Yep.
But it is the adult center, it's based on actual use.
Yep.
So
Yep.
depending on the
Mhm.
use of Ferguson Township residents for this program.
I think they added staff though too.
Oh,
That's what
and-
I'm trying to
Yeah, I think
remember.
they added they promoted, they changed the structure internally.
Mm.
They've been busy. Doing stuff like that.
Okay, all right.
Yep.
Flagged, noted.
Flagged,
Thank you.
thanks.
And
Yep, that's it.
that's it. We're back to
All right.
Eric.
All right, back to Eric. We've got 45 minutes and ticking. We are on special revenue.
Wait, did
Ooh.
we do fire?
Oh, I'm
And
sorry, we
emergency
blipped it down.
services?
I did it in my own notes. Fire protection and emergency services. Oh, thank you.
Sure.
Such a good chair.
I shouldn't have said
Did
They'll be easy ones.
it
Yeah,
was
it says
right
the COG
after,
ones that were up
right.
top, and then we dropped it down.
Okay, I understand. So fire protection,
Hmm.
just put my bookmarks back
See
together.
that. Get loosey-goosey.
Fire's at 110.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is the one where really we have like a larger policy question that we need to engage the COG and maybe other partners. You know,
Yes, I'm slowly getting to this page. Okay,
I
page.
mean, in the future, in the very near future.
So there is a increase. We had budgeted for 2022, 320,181, and what's budgeted for 2023 is 377,929.
Some of that increase, I think, is there fire capital?
Yes.
Okay, maybe that's
At
not
the very
that
bottom
increase
of the
then.
page.
Okay, then I'll hold my thoughts until we get there, because I'm not sure then if there's an increase.
There was a little bit of
Stipend.
staffing, and the, yeah, the
Ah,
stipend
that's it.
increased,
Thank
and there
you.
was some one-time
Yep.
cost for the new chief replacement.
Thanks.
And
Yep. Thanks. And we're not gonna flag, we are
Mhm. And then we have the fire capital contribution budgeted for 2023, $111,557.
And the reason why I think that's going up a little is I think this is the year we're investing in both of the Patton Township Fire Station and the Borough Fire Station to make investments into them, which we did do the Borough Fire Station before too. And that's kind of the larger policy discussion is like those structures are owned by the municipalities and we're now investing significant capital investments in them. And with the discussions of the COG building and how we should all own the assets through the COG is the philosophy driving behind that, not that we should individually own portions of it. So then if you're using that philosophy, you would probably transfer that to the fire stations too. But then you also have the fact that the COG administration building is something that all the partners participate in, and the fire stations are not something that all the partners participate in. So owning them by the COG might, so there's like policy things to work out in terms of that. But then we also have the 2 lowest response times in the region. So in the past, the discussion has been, well, Ferguson Township will need to build a fire station, but really is that in this day and age with our growth and development now, is that still really the discussion, or is it that we really need to think about fire protection solely from a regional perspective and really think about that strategic planning, and then we can make our $3 million investment wherever it's best used. So that's that. But for now, this is great, and the increase is probably due to the investment in those other satellite stations. Yeah.
So did you want this flagged or?
Nope, I just wanted to say that to
Okay.
kind of keep everybody, you know, because we're gonna be talking about the COG budget in the COG General Forum meeting. And what I just said, or some consolidated version of it, is really a good thing to get out into the COG because that's where the discussion actually belongs, so.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And then emergency services.
Emergency services. I don't think I have a page number for that.
Well,
It's not on there.
It's,
Oh, yeah.
119.
119, okay, thank you,
I
Eric.
think it's 100.
Okay, so on page 119, we have emergency management contribution at 38,151.
Yeah, quite stable.
Very stable. And we also have a, let's see, contingency set at 0.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, now it's back to Eric.
There we go, thank you.
Thank
And first up is the street light fund. I've got a page number on the agenda of 153.
Correct. Not a whole lot going on with most of these funds. Streetlight fund, we raised the assessment last year, and that assessment is adequate for the next year. In fact, at some point, we might be able to drop it a little bit, but right now, we're gonna keep it at 35 cents. And that provides sufficient funding to pay for the streetlight electricity. A little bit of maintenance money on page 154 if something needs maintained, something half breaks or so forth. I'll move to the hydrant fund, similar situation, that's on page 156. State College Borough's probably gonna raise their rates, State College Water Authority is probably gonna raise their rates again. We do have sufficient rate increase in our assessment to cover that. So we're hoping that maybe in '24, we can also take a look at that and maybe reduce the fee or the assessment rate.
It's their third year in their 3-year raising of their,
Oh, they really
Fees or-
increased them a lot.
I think they had a strategy of a couple years of increasing.
And we put a little money in for contingency because we're expecting them to raise them some more. General obligation fund?
I have a quick question
Sorry?
about the streetlights and the tariff and the assessment. When we take the streetlights off the tariff in Pine Grove Mills, is that gonna do anything to like put more people on the assessment then?
Because now it's on a tariff, I don't,
I was wondering that myself, but I was gonna ask Eric after the meeting.
okay. And if it's true that in the past, those tariff lights were being paid by the whole group of us, all 19,000 of us, were they? Because they were tariffed, so it was just an electric bill.
I think the idea of the street light fund is to pay for the tariffs that we pay West Penn Power. So, for example, there's an overhead Cobra light, and someone has to put that light in, and we pay them, you know, $20 or $10 a month for the light. Then we're collecting an assessment so that we can end up paying for those fees. But now the lights that are gonna be coming off the tariff and putting on our own electric meters,
Yeah.
we haven't had that discussion yet as to
Okay.
how those are gonna get billed out, or if they are.
Yeah, okay, all right.
Have we heard?
I'm excited
We
that I
have
had
not.
the same
Yeah.
question
And-
as Dave
and-
Montfort.
Have we?
The
Master?
assessment, the
We
other,
haven't.
Okay.
yeah, the
Okay, all
assessment's
right,
based
for
upon the
later.
benefit of the streetlight.
Right,
Yeah,
but when they were
whether who
tariffed.
pays for it or not, yeah.
I
So
guess,
if-
we can
maybe
talk
it's
about it,
fine.
also, it
Yeah.
doesn't matter, it's like that very small amount, but I'm just thinking that if at one time we were saying, by paying it this way, we're not assessing the neighbors of it, the light's neighbors, but the way we assess, right, it's whoever is in a certain circumference, so
Mhm.
we're, in one way, we're saying like, we weren't gonna assess that, and that was fine.
The history precedes me, and I haven't been as involved in the billing in the past.
Mhm.
My involvement's been because GIS has been part of engineering, but usually whatever the streetlight map is, that's when they put the circles on and determine the square footage and do the assessment. So which ones we should be assessing and which one we shouldn't, we probably haven't had that discussion.
Okay, so
yet.
it's a policy discussion
Yeah,
then.
yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Sorry, and thanks. And we were probably already through the hydrant
Yeah.
fund into the general obligation fund
Yeah.
when I had that question.
Yeah.
Okay.
General obligation fund, age 172, a little bit of interest, we do have a little bit of money in the account, so we're collecting interest on that. And we are transferring some money from the general fund, since there's roughly 400,000 in the account, I reduced the amount from the general fund by 100,000, and I think we could probably do it the following year, and maybe the following year, to get it down to a lower number. That way we still pays our debt service and have sufficient money in the fund to handle that. So, all you're seeing is interest and principal broken out separately. Page 172 shows how much we owe, and it also shows what the future payments will be just for the principal, and then the interest, as you can see, it drops as the principal's paid off. 173, 165,000. For 23, it'll drop to 156, to 147, to 140, 132, and eventually, you know, it's a 25-year loan, so, or 25-year bonds, so it'll be a while before that goes down completely. Want to
Eric,
continue?
I have a question.
Sure.
I've asked it before, you might have answered it in a way, I understand it, but I forget. So whenever we talk about debt service, we only ever talk about our public works building, but we have loans from the pools and the regional park that the way the loan documents are arranged, we are actually the holder of the debt, not the COG, not the park authority, not anybody
Yep.
but us. It's a direct debt to us. Why doesn't it show up in the same way our other direct debt shows up?
Well, and this goes back, we've put the pool's debt in Fund 31, because there's a substantial fund balance in there, and rather than use the general fund money to pay that, the board decided to use the regional money, in fee in lieu.
$800,000
The fee
from the
fee in
Toll
lieu
Brothers
from,
and et
from
cetera,
the,
et cetera.
help the other.
That
to
whole
pay
thing
for
again
that.
and again, every year I
Old
do this, I
Yeah.
take us deep down into that wormhole, okay?
Yeah, so, that's why.
So the reason why we don't see the debt where we see the public works debt is because of that money that we receive to pay it, not because it's not debt that we have, which it is.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a shared, yeah, we're guaranteeing that, yeah, it's a legal issue, I'm not real
None of us are,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, thank you. That's it. That's
Okay.
the only question about that. Any others? Okay.
Now we get to
Small funds.
ag preservation. There is some money in the fund, so we'll collect a little bit of interest on that. I did put 10,000 in for a transfer. The board can pick and, do whatever they want. And I did get a hold of the county, and
Okay.
they said there's one farm that we potentially could help pay for. Centrise and I talked, and we figured, okay, we know 150 used to be one, it used to be $1, and so we kind of like split the difference and
Yep.
and said 50.
Thank
So,
you.
but that's up to you guys what you want to do.
Thank you. So we don't need to flag this for this budget discussion, but we would flag it for policy discussion. And I am not enthusiastic about leaving it in here like this, because anytime we're having a cost that could be covered by another entity, I want that other entity to cover it. But just for expediting purposes, we can put that into a policy discussion, but it would be great if it could be in like January. So we can kind of nail that down. Thanks. So they know what to expect, right, in case it changes one way or another.
Okay,
Yeah.
sounds good.
Pine Grove Mills Streetlight Fund, it's kind of a jump, it's 287, because it goes past the CIP. This fund will be depleted, I believe, because we are gonna build those streetlights in Pine Grove Mills, so we can use that existing fund balance to help pay for those. So there's a whole $21,000 in that account.
Exciting.
Mhm.
And then we're gonna close out that fund, right? Because
We
that
will
was
close
just,
that
yeah.
fund. Yep. No point in having it.
Park improvement fund.
It goes to James.
This will take a minute then.
Parks improvements, okay, so I'll just start out with the big items. Greenbrier Saybrook Playground equipment installation, we have 100,000 budgeted for that. That project is kind of carried over because of the master plan process that's still going on, so kind of holding off until that's completed to put the playground equipment in. There was an inspection on May 31st of this year that said this is definitely a need. It's probably the oldest playground equipment in the park inventory.
That's the Saybrook.
Greenbrier Saybrook Playground.
That was flagged by a Parks Committee member as being something that we really should be looking at, so good for us and good for them.
Yeah. Suburban Park, that is ongoing, that's the big one, 884. That does have the DCNR grant of 250 and the UAJA contribution of 126. Cecil Urban, that's kind of a new one, that's definitely seen a change. Originally, I think.
Hang on a second, James, we're still maybe on a page number right now.
Right.
Sorry, you were.
Hang on.
He's at 291. 290,
Well, we need to
291.
go through, yeah, I think he jumped
Oh,
around.
okay,
That's
okay.
what's
Searching
happening.
for the word
So we go
suburban,
back to
like,
Greenbrier, Saybrook, or the beginning of the Parks Fund, then everyone can
Yeah,
follow along.
sorry.
Okay, yeah, sorry.
Yep, so we go, yeah, after, let's go with the undesignated park
Oh, okay.
projects.
All right, sorry.
Yep, no, that's okay.
We're close,
Yeah,
we're close.
playground safety and contingency, 10,000, park surveying, 10,000, recreation park and open space plan, carrying over from 2021, we have 20,000, set aside for that.
Okay, hang on right there. Hang on 1 second. Is that $1,000 for bike racks for spin bike program? That's gonna be reimbursed by the university then? That's a statement, not a question.
I had that flag too, so yeah,
It's a request,
no.
that we've had,
yeah.
from,
The
member of
university,
the public to put a bike rack
from the
in the
university.
parking lot. at
for the
Suburban Park.
spin bikes,
For
or?
the university's
Oh, yeah,
bikes.
no, that was me.
I think,
Yeah, that was me.
We had a member of the public. I wasn't sure.
No,
'cause I
totally, you
remember
could
Jenna
totally drive
sharing-
me out. No, it just, Suburban Park doesn't have very
No.
many parking spaces, and the spin bikes were all they were across 3 parking spaces. So I just sort of brought it to their attention.
Overnight too. Just curious, I'm just curious about
I don't
this.
know,
Yeah.
I don't know, because I just walk through and see what I
Yeah.
see.
But it's a thing, if there's a bike per parking space at a park, that's a
Yeah, it was
thing, and it's,
yeah.
it's a thing that we wanna work out the details, cause of course we love the program.
Of course.
But we're kind of setting a standard here as to how it will be deployed across the entire region, and if we have it in 5 parks, that's 5,000 of our dollars, and et cetera, et cetera.
Well, they
Yeah.
should be
So it
paying
was-
for the bike racks.
Right, I think.
Tudeck doesn't have bike
They pay for
racks.
the entire
What?
program.
Tudeck doesn't
For
have bike
centuries,
racks.
we are
Well,
freaking
right,
out.
yeah, I want to just provide a point of clarification
Yeah.
here. So this bike program comes at a cost that we don't pay at all, which
Right.
is great, right?
Yes.
So Penn State pays for the bikes
Right.
and they absorb all the cost required to have
Yes.
the program. And while I would agree with you, I think the township's position would certainly be, I'm not recommending that we invest to maintain or,
Right.
advance the program. I think we've got, maybe this is based on a quote from Spin. There had not been direct conversations with the transportation department over at Penn
Yeah,
State.
right.
This just came in maybe a few weeks ago, and I apologize. I thought maybe it was a board member, but I couldn't recall. It was shared with me from the Director of Planning and Zoning. So we certainly might be able to negotiate at that number to a 0. The budgeted amount there is just suggesting that if we want to maintain this program, we might also just, if we want to say, hey, we want a bike rack, be prepared to say, okay, we can help offset the cost for this request, because we benefit 100% from this program. This is not a program that Penn State has to do for us, so
Oh,
it's just
right, no, but
and
we
if we
also-
paid,
right.
it would be a lot of money to have, these, if Spin, to have Spin bikes here in the township would be a fee that right now Penn State's absorbing.
Sure.
Do we even have a bike rack in Suburban Park?
Well,
was
that's a
my
good question. I don't know.
Yeah,
In
this
other
is
I'm
like,
trying to
this-
think, I don't even think there's a bike rack in Suburban Park.
Yeah, and I'm certainly, if you like this flag, we can flag
Oh,
it.
yeah, and it's $1,000, so it's not about the $1,000, it's about the much larger policy question. Like, yeah, it's just many things are popping to mind, like, oh, and don't they need to be covered in the winter? And wow, Ferguson only gave us a bike rack, and now we need covered things, and et cetera, and now they're stolen, but they're stuck to a Ferguson bike rack, and who's liable for that? And just so like, many questions. Dave Modrick, you had your hand
I
up?
just
Yeah.
had a question.
Yeah.
And maybe James knows or John. Is the bike rack dedicated for Spin? Like it's gonna say Spin, or can
Yeah.
anybody
It's
park their
fancy,
bike
I
there?
What I understand, this request was that anybody could use this.
They could
And-
just say bike rack.
Yeah, really, I think what was happening too is that Suburban Park does not have a bike rack, and there also was the idea that with additional Spin bikes coming into the area, that it would offset the bike racks that did exist, you would need extra ones in other places. So we might need an additional bike rack, so it was kind of like the contingency for additional bike infrastructure.
So I have
Right,
some
and-
things
and I
about
just wanna
Fairbrook Park then,
make a-
because like Fairbrook Park's bike racks get carried around and they're not, like, so
We're not bolted
the
to the
master,
ground.
so, yeah, so could we,
Pretty soon they're gonna end up
something you
reselling.
said in the past about the parks portion of the budget, and I think it would be something that we would maybe wanna consider moving forward, is to have a workshop with the Parks Committee and the board prior to budget, just yet another thing prior to budget. The reason why, it's a really big budget typically, we invest a lot in our parks, we wanna do it well, we've got master plans, we're working on organization of it. This obviously triggered a lot of feelings with the board for many reasons, so many reasons, like, is it tied to a master plan? How do we know it? It came from this way, other bike racks, other needs in other parks. So,
Right.
could we flag this one? For next year, can we talk about tying parks requests to master plans? And between this year and next year, could we really work on getting all the parks master plans online? It's something that comes up kind of annually, and I know that, we have a varying degree of level of professionally done master plans, and like the recent ones are, I think, online, and that's great. But just,
Yeah, that's a
yeah.
good point. Yeah, we
right,
can certainly
so-
work on that.
Right, so like, and do the bike racks, I mean, are they the same? Because their spin bikes are really big, and do they fit in a normal bike rack? And maybe Penn State wants to cost share with us on this.
I apologize. I think that may have been, the confusion may have been something I said. So Suburban Park doesn't have a bike rack at all. And actually, the more I'm thinking through this, there might be, as part of the Suburban Park master plan update, it's very likely that the amenity of a bike rack already exists.
Yes.
So, and so for clarification, this, I know it says here bike racks for spin bike program, but that's not entirely accurate. It's because of spin bike, being left there, and there's being more usage of these spin bikes, which is why you're seeing more there. So the need, or the response to spin bikes is just showing that people are leaving their bikes lay in the parking lot, and there's not an existing bike rack. So any bike, user, anyone that's utilizing a bike currently doesn't have a bike rack at Suburban Park to put their bike at.
Great, so could we then first move it down under Suburban Park
Yeah,
projects? Because it just says bike racks for spin bike
Yeah, that
program,
needs to be
which makes me
yep.
think under
I agree.
unspecified that we're now gonna buy one for every park. Second, could you just have somebody go out and get the bike rack at Fairbrook Park that's never used, and people just move it around? It's sort of like a scavenger hunt for the bike rack. People never use it. It's just moved around. We could bring it over to Suburban Park,
Sure.
where people probably will
So-
use it a lot more than
Exactly.
they use it there.
Because a lot of people park there to go on the
Yes.
McKee Street bike path,
Yes.
etc.
Yes, and one day we'll know more about the parks and that we
Yeah.
can better move our resources. I mean,
Thank you.
yes,
Great
because
idea.
it drives me, I'm like, oh, great, somebody moved it again. It must have been in their way.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah,
So,
I saw Dave taking a note, so I
thank you.
think we
Oh,
can.
Thank you so
you.
much.
Great.
I was gonna check to see if I'm supposed to do that, but I
Yeah.
don't wanna,
Yeah.
I don't wanna take anything away from Park and Rec if they're supposed to be moving it.
Well, that was gonna be, I was gonna segue into another policy discussion to put a pin in real quick. And it does relate to if we eventually actually have a place for spin bikes that's covered, and we have some sort of relationship long-term with Penn State where we share resources and we do it in a transparent way, we will want to acknowledge that they are having some part of our parks, right? And that's important because also out in Fairbrook Park, right, there is one particular group, unlike any group across the region, that is allowed for some reason to keep all of their equipment there year-round and pay no fees for it. So it's not fair or uniform. And so like this, right, talking about Penn State, let's try to evolve a policy where we have a fair, uniform kind of an idea about when other groups that are valid groups that we want to cooperate with and participate, some sort of standards to set the tone for that relationship, maybe. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah, with the spin bikes, from what I've actually observed in
Yes.
some major metropolitan areas I've been to that have those, there is actually not even
No coverage.
covered parking for them, or
Okay.
even a bike rack. Now, I have seen in the city of Pittsburgh, I prefer using the scooters. They do have designated, I guess their ordinance, they were able to incorporate with spin, you're to leave your scooter either in a designated bike rack space or designated parking, and they do have actually, along some curbs, they actually will have a square cut with scooters, and it's like, okay,
Right.
it's legal for me to park a scooter there.
Active transportation plan,
Yes.
right? Active,
Yes.
it's screaming active transportation plan to me.
Absolutely.
Region-wide policy that's consistent. Thank you. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, we're still gonna be done at 4. Okay.
And it's like a $30 or
More park-
$40 charge in the spin app to your credit card if you illegally park your scooter.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I would never do that. Back to you, James. Thank you for your
Yeah.
patience with us.
Yeah, no
Okay,
problem.
so we are over the spin bike program rack trauma and
We're like we went for a spin on that.
Okay.
The
I'll-
projects.
I'll go in order this time. I was going for the big,
Yeah.
I said, but, okay, Homestead
Linear.
Park, 0. Suburban Park, back to this one.
Yep.
So this is the big one, offset with a little bit of grant money and a contribution from UAJA.
Yeah.
Greenbrier, Saybrook, that is.
Hang on, off-site trail connection is showing still $2,500. Is that just for the closing costs on the easement?
It's actually, I apologize, we need to make an amendment here and remove that. It's my
Okay.
understanding that that has been
Oh.
done.
Okay, it's done, all the closing costs are paid or whatever, it's.
I will get
filed.
confirmation,
Thank you,
but I-
wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, Haymarket, 0, Tudig, currently at 0, Cecil Urban, so this is the one that we just submitted the grant to the DCNR for the fall supplemental grant round. So this is a 50/50 grant award, if awarded to us, so we are asking for $386,000. The total project cost is $772. If we don't get this awarded, we will pause
Mhm.
on the project
Yep.
until we find another funding source.
But the playground equipment above is going through, and the suburban park, we're well on our way.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Let's see here, Songbird Sanctuary, 50,000 for the implementation of phase 2. Some fence installation, tree replacement in the baseball complex, and I think.
So I want to flag the Songbird Sanctuary. Poor old Songbird Sanctuary keeps getting flagged. But like anything that's not in process, I'm doing it with COG, I'm doing it here, like with these, I kind of want to flag it because of materials costs. I don't necessarily want to remove it from the budget, but like it's one of those, I don't want to borrow from another place to like complete this because it could be deferred very easily. Thoughts. You want to red flag it?
Yeah.
I mean, can we
Yeah.
red flag it? Red flag it?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. And then I have to, wait, did we already pass Tudeck Park? Did we pass Tudeck?
We did.
Yes.
Okay, so I don't remember if it's in our CIP, but I have said it, I don't know if I got it in there, but that bathroom at Tudeck Park is in terrible condition. I think it is in terrible
No.
condition. I don't know if others feel the same way. And when I say terrible, I don't mean like it might be dangerous terrible. I just mean like there's been a persistent leak in that bathroom for years now, like around the toilet or sink or something in the women's bathroom, and it's definitely not, I've been touring the parks because it's a 2.5-year-old grant, and it's definitely not up to some other standards. And it's something that if it's not in our CIP for 5 years, it probably should be.
Well, the next phase is in 2025.
And maybe that's a renovation of that building, I don't know.
Could be.
But I think in the taking care of what we have versus expansion thoughts, that's a take care of what we have item.
Mhm.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
Yep.
And are we through parks then?
I have one
Sylvie, go ahead.
question. Okay, so back to Cecil Irvin.
Mhm.
So in the CIP was, and I want to know first if this got changed, but this is what is in this CIP that's attached, okay. Cecil Irvin has, nothing for 23, and then 320,000 in 24 with a $160,000 grant.
Mhm.
Because we went after the grant, so we bumped it to now to use it.
Right,
Right,
so
we
what's?
read a resolution to the board, and we received authorization to submit for a grant application to construct, if awarded, the Cecil Irvin Phase 2.
So would that likely, all that construction happen in 2023?
Good question.
That is a great
It's-
question.
I
The
can
engineers
say-
have advanced some of the design work, but it's not complete, and Assistant
tell you
Township
that,
Manager has more.
Yeah, I don't know if it would be 1 year, but there is a timeline for this specific grant of 4 years.
Okay, so we'd have
We're trying to
maybe
get it in.
4 years. And then, so this was phase 2 of Cecil Irvin, so that was budgeted at 320.
Mhm. That was based on a 2018 estimate, from what I understand.
So is it the same plan, but we've doubled the cost estimate because of?
It's mostly yes, it's the same plan with the interconnection of the dual loop, and that's really the only change.
Additional trail.
So Cecil Irvin Phase 2 has been floating through the committees. with the understanding that we probably wouldn't really advance conversation until next year, until we got this grant opportunity award. And as part of the amendments that were being discussed by Pine Grove Mills Small Area Plan Advisory Committee and the Parks and Recreation Committee in 2021, there was discussion about the dual loop, and at the time even an amphitheater, as well as I think the most notable amenity that really encouraged me as, you know, the manager to want to advance this and on behalf of the board's expressed interest in the CIP was that connectivity piece into Pine Grove Mills to follow along with advancing the amenities that we have for Pine Grove Mills. So you'll see the Cecil Irvin Park master plan update to phase 2 includes a sidewalk. So with that in mind, there are slight amenity changes from the master plan that was initially done by HRG in 2011. And this this advanced slight change has had public input. So Supervisor Strickland, I've answered your question and more.
Yeah, so I guess, you know, our real costs go up like $300,000.
Our real costs have gone up with this, you know, the connectivity was, in the grand scheme of things, a slight cost, increased a cost. Inflation really has increased the numbers here.
From 2018
that we're
to now,
seeing.
because we don't know about materials costs. so
Right,
it's
and
just
we
inflation.
only see this inflation going up, or stabilizing with these increased numbers.
So if we don't get the grant, it's a moot point. because-
Exactly,
Well,
that
it
would be
is-
my recommendation.
It is, but my point is, you know, that you might have to relook. I'm not entirely sure I'm comfortable with that level of expansion of the plan, given the increase in cost. So, I mean, if we get the grant, then, you know, moving forward makes sense, but I still think there should be a relook at the scope of the project,
I also-
given the cost increases.
Thank you, and I just want to say the amphitheater was discussed, but is not part of the scope of work. As Assistant Manager said, the slight change includes the loop, the dual loop. So initially, there was always a loop. The slight change includes the dual loop, and I believe the connectivity toward Pine Grove Mills is the
Well, along
slight
Nixon,
change.
along Nixon.
Along Nixon,
Mhm.
thank you. And when I say slight change, I think that was in phase 3. It just wasn't in
Oh.
phase 2. I think it's, right, so, but the parking lot
Yeah.
that is part of
That
phase
is
2
necessary.
is included. So there's not a significant change to the scope of work as part of the initial master plan.
So here is how I'm thinking about it, Lisa, and maybe bust holes in my lazy cognition, is that we would be spending about the same amount of money, even though it's doubled, because hopefully we get the grant, but if we don't get the grant, we won't be spending the money at all.
We're still spending more, because we would only have been spending like 160.
Well, if you inflate
yeah.
it from
Yeah,
2018.
you
Well,
gotta
yeah.
count for inflation.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
per the CIP, we go up
Oh,
through.
per the CIP.
Per the CIP, this
Got
year's
you.
CIP,
Got you.
it goes up,
Got
ballparking
you.
300,000.
That's-
in our
Okay.
contribution
Got
to
you.
it. So that's why I'm just saying, if that's a scope
Thanks.
issue, you know, if we get the grant, then obviously we
Got
have to
you.
follow through with what we're matching
No,
with
it's
it.
a lag issue.
But if we
There
can
was-
phase that, I think that makes a lot more.
So,
Okay.
I can tell you that for the interconnectivity piece, we looked at that and explored what it would be, taking it in, taking it out, and knowing that that was mostly just asphalt, an asphalt path. It was the difference of about $20,000. And that was really the major difference in.
The Nixon Road piece.
The
No,
connectivity.
the interconnectivity.
Oh, the interconnectivity.
Within the loop in the park. So we were connecting it to Nixon Road
So
and
the
then
expansion was
adding a piece in the middle of the park. That is the major addition, and that was a difference of about $20,000. So you're really looking at just like the overall cost of implementing phase 2 is inflated that
Right.
much.
The scope didn't increase.
No,
Right.
not in a grand
Per se.
fashion, no.
Speaking
That's
of the scope
crazy.
increase, yeah, well,
That's a
you know,
huge
there was a normal
jump.
inflation and then abnormal inflation, so it's really stressful. Question about that connectivity piece that was apparently in phase 3, and we should never do that again. We should always like connect it before we build it, because like, we're gonna build the whole park, and the whole time it's built, people can't get to it. So that seems
We didn't have the
different.
parking lot.
But, right, because it's about the parking, but, that piece seems like it's gonna be a significant concern, because aren't we gonna have to get easement, because then not enough right-of-way was preserved there, and it's, people have a fence there, there's a gully.
Yeah, I
It's like,
think,
it's one lot length that we need to worry about, but it's
right.
got a
we
lot
were kind
going
of-
on.
I don't, we explored that as well, and we're
Okay.
trying to understand how much room we needed
Okay.
there.
Well,
And,
Okay.
I-
And again, we're getting into
yeah.
the weeds,
Yeah.
but, you know, it's like, we hope we can get this done, we're worried about the cost, same kind of a story, so.
Would you like me to flag
Do we
this?
wanna flag it, Lisa? Do we wanna flag it?
Well, I don't know if that's necessary, because we've submitted for the grant, and we
Right.
have to match it, so.
It's a wait and see thing.
But I think my assumption was that there was a lot more in the scope, and so that's disappointing, but, you know, there's nothing really we can
Right.
change
We
about it
can
at this
flag it
point.
and bring back more
Yeah,
facts
that's
if you would
fine,
like
just
that.
to give some facts.
And we can do that after, because like I said, there's really
Okay.
nothing we can amend here. I was just assuming there was a lot more going into it.
Well, we're getting the whole parking lot, but can you put it on the agenda items for January? Which, or January or February or March, or maybe after I'm done in December, whenever we can get to it. No, I wanna talk about it, it's just as we are so busy. Okay, next up in the parks, are we through
That's it. That's it for
everything?
parks. Yep.
Okay. Any other final questions, general questions on parks? Okay, did I talk about then, like strategic planning for parks? Could we put that in an agenda item for January or, I don't, when I say January, I mean next year, right?
I mean, Lisa's tenure.
Or just like 2 months from now?
That's a good point. Lisa, I'm sorry. So you can flag my flagging if you'd like to.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'd like to change the terminology.
Alright. Yeah. Eric Anderson, fiduciary funds.
All right, these should go relatively quick. Police pension fund, page 293. This is a trust fund for the police officers that are retired. This year's not been good for investments. That's gonna affect us probably at the next actuarial report, because there's assumptions that are being made on how much money that the fund's gonna make, and if they're losing money, then we gotta double that, so. The state doesn't give us money for that, as we spoke earlier. On page 294 is a list of retired officers, including Chris Albright. Some meeting expenses, actuarial fees for the actuarial study, broker fees, cost for PNC to manage our investments, or the fund's investments, and some payroll taxes that are part of the retired payroll. Fund 65, that's the non-uniform, non-officers, this is for the other than the officer police department. Again, fairly significant loss this year in investments. There's not a actuarial report, but each employee has their own fund, or own account, I should say. And they invest as they wish within the bounds of the investment choices available. And then anybody that is not completely vested, that leaves some of their money, that the unvested component will be forfeited back to the township, since the township pays the money up front. And then there's also a health insurance, or a retirement health savings plan that we invest in, and that's in there as well. We don't budget for anybody taking money out, but if somebody does, we do show that in the projected numbers or the actuals. That's it for those. And last but not least, to Memorial Park, that's page 301. Talked to some trees, there's not a whole lot going on with the fund this year. We did, like we said, because the stock market's down, the investment with FNB has lost some money, and so has the money with Center Foundation. As is common, we'll have a bad year one year and make up for it in the next couple of years, so.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's significant. We do get money from the rental farmhouse and the horse boarding, so that stays the same for next year. No major contributions that I'm aware of. We do have some money for printing and scanning, advertising. There is an audit that needs to be done on the trust, done by Baker Tilly. That fee's in there. Look like we're gonna do some improvements to the rental house this year, didn't get to it, so it'll re-budget for next year. Implement shed, a couple correct repairs to that. General improvements to the, in case you can read it. New native meadowed area adjacent to the Snetziger Butterfly Garden, 15,000. Again, that wasn't done this year, so it'll be budgeted for next year. Operating supplies, there's some money for the butterfly gardens, dog park maintenance, farmhouse maintenance, implements, there's small dollars. Stormwater fee, oh, I wanted to bring that up too, I don't know if we hit it yet. The township and the Tudic Trust pay a stormwater fee as well as the rest of the public that are subject to it.
Hang on a second, so our parks pay a stormwater fee? Right? Is that what
The
you're saying?
township building
Yes.
does,
Yeah,
yeah.
but we pay that fee, not Center Region Park and Rec.
Well, I think when it comes to parks, I don't recall seeing a bill for us, so I think Parks and Rec pays that,
The property owner pays it,
yeah.
whoever owns the property.
So in
So
White
if
Hawk
we
Road
own-
Regional Park, who's gonna pay that stormwater? Are we, as part of the property owner, gonna pay that stormwater fee?
So we'll look at the Center County tax records,
Yeah,
and whoever's.
We are on the
name-
ownership
name
there, I
it's
just
in,
checked it the other day on the Webbia,
That's who pays the fee.
and they're not on it at all. So we're gonna
yeah,
have to
if there is
figure
a
that out.
fee, if those are
They're putting in
correct,
525
we would pay.
parking spaces against our will, and we're gonna then have to
Yeah,
get a
it's
stormwater fee
impervious
based on
area,
that, and that's why they didn't care about it when I talked to them about it, so. So
Yeah, now
off
to be
target
determined
there.
by engineers, yeah.
Quick question on the Tuduck Park contributions and the butterfly garden numbers. So we budgeted in 2022, we budgeted $2,000 for the butterfly gardens, and that wasn't used, I guess? And how would it, I know that the Snetzinger volunteers would have used it if they'd have known it was there. Is that for us to direct, or the trust, or who?
The trust.
Who tells whom about that then?
The
Okay.
trust.
Okay. Alrighty, and then the contributions, so I'm noticing here about the contributions, there's some sort of partnership with Park and Rec, I'm sorry, I lost my page. Butterfly Garden contributions.
Mhm.
The trust partnered with Township and Park and Rec to raise additional revenue.
Back in 19, yeah.
Yeah, do people call our township building when they're trying to give those donations or those contributions? Or where do those contributions get called into? How are those contributions received?
We have had, especially with the Tudic Memorial, with the
Yeah.
Elsie Tudic, we had people calling us and asking us, how to donate, and they would deliver it to us and we would put it in the park.
Does our website say that people should donate to us directly, or are they calling Center Region Park and Rec sometimes to think they are gonna donate there, do you think?
So there's a combination here. So I think with the Tudic Trust, or excuse me, the dog park, generally that's something that's been managed through by CRPR. The Butterfly Gardens contribution, I'd have to confirm with the former manager, but I think that was something that we may have been organized or assisted with organizing in the name or in honor of Elsie Tudic to do the Butterfly Gardens. So we've received some contributions and donations for the trust, and when I say we, the townships received it, it's gone into the account for the trust for the Butterfly Garden, and any other, sometimes I'll use the word random, because I think we got a couple this year that was just like, we knew we knew the family, we just want to make this donation.
Right.
But particularly the dog park, which is pretty clearly defined, or in terms, I'll say in practice, that CRPR manages the dog park, therefore, we've received donations for the dog park, but so has CRPR. They actually managed at one point a program. You can go out there, there's some type of plate in terms of like, depending the size of the donation would determine what size of plate you look, yeah.
Gotcha, okay.
So there's a combination,
Thanks.
of
So
ways.
each year we kind of breeze through the trust, it's always at the end of the meeting,
Mhm.
and then also there's maybe some transitions there, and then there's maybe some lack of communication. The TUDEC folks had sent the board a little while back some documents that the trust and they had produced at one time, and there was that platform, right, the observation platform, there were some plans, and it seemed like there seemed to be some alignment between the trust and the Butterfly Garden volunteers on moving forward on the platform. So I'm just thinking, like, how can we then begin to take these donations in service to putting that platform in, which I know is in our CIP, but when we put it in the CIP, we talked about how the trust maybe could offset some of those dollars. So this year, just can we red flag it, just as can we lay the foundation through the budget or the conversations or the meetings to begin to coordinate our efforts to produce that asset for everyone? Yeah? That's it. Any other, we're at the end of the agenda. So any other final comments on everything we've breezed through? We have a relatively short list. Is there any other red flags that we want to add? Okay, there's a consent agenda on here. Do we have a consent agenda?
We do not.
Okay.
Sorry for the confusion there.
That is not a
Chair.
problem. That was a just in case, because
Just
we were
in case.
considering canceling
Right,
the
there,
next
at one
meeting.
point, we were,
Yeah, we
yeah.
were considering, yep. Okay, so we're moving into adjournment if there's nothing else. All right, I'll accept a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
So moved. 4:01.
That's Patty.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Make that motion.
Oh, and we're adjourned.
Great.
Great.